Great, thank you so much. Good evening, this is Mayor Stewart, and I would like to call this regular meeting of the City Council to order and state that all council members are present through teleconferencing. First, Councilmember Shoresman, will you please lead the council in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of course. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic of which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Sorry, y'all had a technology operator error. Well, next we have the city manager report. Derek Johnson, would you like to present the report?
Yes, let me just go ahead and, Madam Mayor, if it's all right, why don't you go ahead if you want to just do the two proclamations,
Sure
and I'll
thing.
come back to that. I just
Sounds good to me.
difficult getting the presentation listed here.
City clerk, do we have Andy Cooper and Zoe Meyer on the line?
Yes, I will transfer them over as you're reading the proclamation.
Great, thank you so much. So today we get to give away share two proclamations. And the first one we'll start with is the Teen Dating Violence Action and Prevention Month. Today we'll have Andy Cooper and Zoe Meyer join us on behalf of the Luminal Alliance. I will start us off with our proclamation. So whereas Teen Dating Violence Action and Prevention Month calls attention to the fact that dating violence is widespread and impacts every young person in San Luis Obispo. And whereas, am I echoing?
There's a monitor on there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, there was an echo in here. Whereas, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, 1 in 11 female teens and 1 in 14 male teens reported experiencing physical violence in the last year. And whereas, according to the CDC, 1 in 3 adolescents report verbal, emotional, physical, or sexual dating abuse each year. And whereas, rates of dating violence affect LGBTQ+ and BIPOC youth at rates higher than their white, cisgender, and heterosexual peers. And whereas teen dating violence has been linked to other forms of violence and aggression, and survivors are more likely to suffer from eating disorders, drug and alcohol use, dropout, teen pregnancy, future abusive relationships, and suicide. And whereas nearly half of students who experience dating violence have reported that some of the abuse took place on school grounds. And whereas Luminal Alliance continues to provide a safe environment for young people affected by teen dating violence with crisis intervention, counseling, legal services, safe emergency housing, and local prevention programs such as Close to Home, Coaching Boys into Men, Sexual Health Reeducation, Redefine SLOW, and Camp Hope America. And whereas the establishment of Teen Dating Violence Action and Prevention Month will benefit schools, communities, families, and all youth. And whereas the city of San Luis Obispo joins Luminal Alliance and Close to Home and other advocates and communities across the country in taking action to prevent dating violence, and acknowledges that each day of the year is an opportunity to create change for the future. Now, therefore, I, Erica A. Stewart, Mayor of the City of San Luis Obispo, on behalf of the entire City Council, hereby proclaim the month of February 2022 as Teen Dating Violence Action and Prevention Month, and support communities to empower teens to develop healthy and violence-free relationships through their lives. Will Zoe?
I believe Zoe needs the. Sorry about that. I believe Zoe needs the request again to be a panelist.
What name is she under? Because I'm not seeing a Zoe.
It might be under Ashling Meyer.
Okay.
Thank you.
There she is.
Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm Ashling Meyer. I also go by Zoe. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm 18 years old. And I'm a volunteer with Close to Home. I have been for a few years. Close to Home is a community action team focused on preventing and educating sexual assault and intimate partner violence in San Luis Obispo. The month of February is used by teens across the nation to raise awareness about and to take action against teen dating violence. Relationships and dating violence affects everyone, but especially young people. Teenagers are new to relationships beyond their own home and are not always able to spot red flags in their peers and partners. Things like healthy communication, established and respected boundaries, constructive growth as a unit and a team, and generally safe spaces to grow have not been taught to most teenagers, and thus their safety in any form is not guaranteed. I know from my own experience, not feeling like you have the platform to say no or tell people close to you that you've been violated is something that changes you forever. No matter their age, gender, sexuality, race, or ethnicity, all teens should have a safe space where they can just be teens. That being said, Black and brown teens and girls are disproportionately targeted from a young age by adults and their peers with harmful narratives that sexualize and traumatize them, causing direct harm to them as adults. They are observed to be more mature than they are or should be as a kid and are forced to grow too quickly, when they deserve a safe childhood and a support system where they can grow at a natural pace. For Black History Month and Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, let's amplify the voices of Black teens here in San Luis Obispo and actually listen. Let's teach our friends and kids to respect each other and hold themselves to a standard of respect and love that they would want to receive from others. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Andy Cooper, and I use all pronouns. I am 17 years old, a senior in high school, and I am a volunteer for Close to Home. In Close to Home, we work to end gender-based violence in our community. In the month of February is both Teen Dating Violence Action and Prevention Month and Black History Month. Both teenagers and Black people are disproportionately affected by intimate partner violence, and more than 40% of Black women in the United States will experience domestic violence in their lifetime. The month of February is also commonly used to celebrate love and relationships. It can seem daunting to take action against something like dating violence, but small actions have a big impact. One way is to have conversations about what a healthy and safe relationship looks like. Anyone and everyone in our community deserves to be respected and safe in relationships. You may think that there isn't much you can do to prevent intimate partner violence in your community, or that the problem is too big, but Close to Home has shown me firsthand that prevention starts with a conversation. You can have these conversations with friends, children, spouses, and coworkers. You can also volunteer your time. Luminal Alliance is SLO County's resource for survivors of sexual assault and intimate partner violence. One of their services is a 24-hour crisis and information line. The next cohort of volunteers will start their training on April 5th, and you can sign up through Luminal Alliance's website before March 15th. You can also get involved by joining Close to Home. Our group works to change the culture of violence in San Luis Obispo, and we want to hear from you. You can sign up to take our community survey or schedule an interview with volunteers. We hope you will take action with us to stop dating violence. Thank you, Mayor Stewart and City Council.
Thank you so much, Andy and Zoe, and I appreciate you joining us. Next, we have a celebration of Black History Month, and is Michael Boyer on the line, City Clerk?
I did not see him.
We can move back to the city manager report, and then we can do the Black History Month proclamation after. City manager?
We can't hear you, Derek.
Unclick the room mic.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. So I'm happy to talk about a few projects tonight. So we are finishing up the slurry seal on Marsh and Hydera Streets and have laid out the permanent striping. The team has also painted curbs on Marsh and Hydera Street. And you may have seen that the Buena Vista Bridge has been repaired. And so a lot of you maybe gone up in Upper Monterey. There was quite a noticeable bump up there. And we've been coordinating with Caltrans and advising them that their bridge needs to be addressed. So what's happening is some of the dirt underneath the overpass bridge is falling away underneath, and as a result, the asphalt has been subsiding. And so we did these repairs. We had to do it the same thing about 6 or 7 years ago, and we put them on notice again that they really need to take a look at their bridge and make sure the abutments are addressed. Long term, if there are anything that the council or the community is looking for in terms of our maintenance activities, et cetera, you can always contact Brian Rodriguez, our engineer, who at 781-7195 or B Rodriguez at slowcity.org, and you can learn more about our paving plans for the upcoming fiscal year. Switching to another project here, the Emerson Park fitness equipment. And so the city of San Luis Obispo is proud to announce that the fitness equipment is now open at Emerson Park. You may recall that this was a grant funded project. It's a new state-of-the-art functional fitness equipment. It's the first to be introduced on the Central Coast and the first between Santa Cruz and Southern California. There's about 200 universities and cities that are part of the program, and we're excited to bring this opportunity for fitness for people of all abilities. The concept is to utilize your body weight and functional fitness methods to earn the workout through 7 different focus areas. There's a free fitness app that's included as examples and videos, and there's even a QR code that you can download the app right at the court. And the Parks and Recreation Department is also looking for fitness ambassadors. We've had great luck, for example, at the skate park, working with ambassadors to help promote the opportunities to work out. And also stay tuned for official ribbon cutting towards the middle of March. We're excited to open up this facility for the rest of the community. I wanted to also update the council and the community about the Orcutt Road north of Orcutt and the Tank Farm roundabout. It is closed to through traffic. The latest update as of this afternoon is that phase 3 will be pushed past February. So COVID has really hit everyone, including some of our construction crews. But this does not mean that we're pushing out the other phases. And so the project is now slated for completion in early July 2022. This means that starting February 22nd, a portion of Orcutt Road north of Tank Farm Road intersection will be closed to through traffic for about 2.5 months. This was delayed from our 2/8 due to COVID and staffing issues that I just previously mentioned. So the segment of Orcutt Road will be closed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with construction work occurring from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. And just to give you a flavor for the community of the things that we're building, the features that we'll be building is the drainage basin to capture storm runoff, continued undergrounding PG&E overhead facilities. We're going to be installing some landscaping and addition of physically separated pedestrian and bike facilities that are part of the roundabout. Just to remind the community, the roundabout is designed to improve overall safety along Orcutt and Rigetti Ranch development. And the roundabout Central Island is designed and will be accommodate a future public art piece that will act as a gateway into the city of San Luis Obispo. And we're partnering with SLOMA on the selection of that piece. And we hope to have an announcement sometime very soon about that. So very excited about all this happening. So just different than the slides, we anticipate that the opening will happen in July for the roundabout. In terms of railroad safety trail ribbon cutting, good news is the contractor is working this week and next to install the repairs that Union Pacific Railroad approved. We were hoping that it'll be completed in the next 2 weeks. If the trail is ready before then, we may have a soft open to the public whenever possible. The lights were energized on the bridge. We've got some safety equipment that has been installed. So we're pretty excited about these improvements, and we think the community will as well. You may have seen if you've driven along California, some of the additional curbing that was installed and some of the railing, some of the striping was done along the bike path itself. So it's shaping up very, very nicely, and we'll be excited to have the ribbon cutting, which will also be scheduling sometime in the middle of March. Switching to an update about some grant funding, we were awarded nearly $30,000 to combat alcohol-related crime. And so the nearly $30,000 grant is from ABC and will assist the police department's effort for reducing access of alcohol to minors and hold accountable those businesses that are violating alcohol-related law. The grant is one of 50 awarded in California to the local enforcement agencies. And the grant is for the fiscal year of 2021 and 2022, and funds will be used to reduce overall access for youth to alcohol. And I just want to say on this point, just how proud I am of the staff of all of the work that we've been doing on grants. You may have recalled that about 18 months ago, we entered into a partnership with Adrienne Harris. And since that partnership that we've entered into, she has worked with city staff to apply for nearly $28 million of grant funding. And we've been awarded over $14 million of grant funding. And currently we have another $2 million in requests pending. So really excited. We'll be talking about that more in the future, about the success. And this is really a testament to all the work that we've done with the community, in particular, the community support of Measure G, when we have the local dollars, that we can leverage those dollars with other grant and outside funding. Now shifting to COVID-19 update is the big news, of course, is that the indoor masking is lifted on February 16th. The state order does continue to require universal masking in certain locales, which include healthcare, school, and other high-risk settings. New cases have slowed, and it's been a gradual decline. And I think the county was very careful in selecting that word today. And hospitalizations have recently remained stable. So we're not out of the woods just yet. And California is up north of 8 million cases with over 80,000 deaths. So this continues to be a serious health issue in our state. And I understand that people are fatigued from nearly 2 years now of being in this pandemic. And we all are hopeful that we are perhaps near a new phase, but nevertheless, we need to continue to be vigilant. IHME forecast for the state of California, and there again, we always lag as the Central Coast, usually a couple weeks behind. You can see today where we are in the upper graph of daily infections and testings. And please remember this graph, because I'll ask you to remember where we are over on the overall decline as we talk about potentially coming back in person. And I have a recommendation for the council tonight about when to do that. You can see on the upper graph, we're quite not on the complete downward of the slope. And you see that we're probably back to where we were in terms of infection rates back in late November, early December, about the middle of March, end of March timeframe. Moving forward, in terms of COVID-19 updates from Cal Poly, students who have tested positive. I won't go through those numbers in detail. You can see that the number of infections has remained fairly stable, not a high infection rate. And I think this is largely due to, you see on that bottom table in terms of the residential all the way to faculty and staff, just the really high rates of vaccination. I think that's a direct correlation in terms of infections and ultimately hospitalizations and et cetera. So really proud of Cal Poly, all the work that they've done to really push up our vaccinations on campus. Where do we stand here in the county? Just over 460 doses administered. I won't go through the rest of the data. You can see this and happy to share the slide deck, but really the next slide shows them the important information, which really the needle's not moving too much. On that third number, the partially vaccinated, it stands just close to 74%, which we want to get that up and be in line with vaccination rates at the end of this, with the rest of the state. Speaking for myself, I certainly was disappointed to learn that the FDA was not prepared to move forward with the vaccinations for 2 to 5, and so that's been postponed. I'm sure we'll all be monitoring that closely, particularly for our working parents here at the city and throughout the rest of the community, because I know that's a real concern for working parents and placing their children in daycare, et cetera. In terms of daily case rates, daily case rates are falling, and the case rate and positivity rate is falling as well. We expect that to fall in a way that we should be back to where we were before we hit the December timeframe. But those are numbers both on the new case rate and the positivity rate that we'll be monitoring closely as we think about potential meetings for the council and some of our respective advisory bodies. SLO County COVID-19 hospitalizations and ICU admissions. I want to try to summarize the communication that came out this afternoon from the Public Health Department, but there is a gradual decline in infections and a stabilization of hospitalizations and ICU admissions. We're not seeing the decline just yet, but something that certainly we'll want to keep an eye out on in the near future. So switching to council meetings, I just want to offer my recommendation tonight is that we have seen the gradual decline in COVID-19 cases, and the active cases are also gradually declining. Tonight at midnight, we'll see the universal masking order lift with those exceptions that I provided earlier and they're included on this slide. New cases have slowed and hospitalizations have remained stable. And based upon the projections, our recommendation is that the council consider beginning in-person council meetings back on March 15th of 2022. And of course, I think, with the caveat that a few things I want to mention. One is that there will be signs at City Hall should the council want to pursue this approach, saying that persons that come in that are unmasked, that they're attesting that they are vaccinated, and that persons that are at risk or perhaps feel that a public meeting is a place that is high at risk may choose, based upon the advice from the CDC and our public health officials, to wear a mask anyways. So that may be something that either the council members or individual attendees to the meeting decide that they want to do. And with that, Madam Mayor, that concludes the presentation for tonight, and happy to answer any questions about that. And then appreciate some direction, because the city clerk and the mayor and myself, the rest of the staff, will need to make some preparations if the council's intentions are to return in person.
Thank you so much. What a thorough presentation. And how many millions of dollars was that in grants again?
We received about over $14 million.
14 million.
About $1.8 million pending. We're pretty confident that that will come in as well. And so this has been a fantastic investment by the city to really leverage some professional fund development and grant writing resources, and it's really paid dividends and helped leverage local tax dollars to produce projects that I know the communities wanted.
That's awesome. Thank you. Are there, oh, yes. Okay. Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, thank you, City Manager Johnson. Just a question about your recommendation here on council meetings going back in person on March 15th. Well, a couple questions. Is that date, what is that March 15 date based on, considering that the indoor masking mandate is really lifted as of tomorrow? Is that based on our readiness, like technologically, to be back in person, or what is the thinking behind that date?
Derek, we can't hear you.
Sorry.
Still didn't hit the button.
I'm hitting the button, so I don't know.
Now we can.
Okay, there you go. All right. So just to say for a third time, I'm not a public health expert. And so based on the information we have access to, which is the IHME model, you know, what you see here is today, and then you can see April of 2022. And you can see that there's a marked difference between the beginning of March and the middle of March. And so that is the totality of what I am looking at, the risk profile and looking at infection rates. And when we start to approach perhaps the infection rates that we saw in the past. And so if you recall, we were back in person about the beginning, middle of July. And then we, as we saw Delta rear its head in the summer months, we went back to virtual. And then based upon where we are now, you know, and this profile and the ramp down of infection rates, the middle of March seemed to be a sweet spot to return back in person.
Okay. Ooh, and then second question for clarification is this would be 100% in person with only ability to view meetings online, not an option for participating, correct?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, Councilmember Shoresman. So the answer is yes, you have two budget items before you tonight as part of the proposed mid-year adjustments, one for staffing and two is for technological investments for hybrid meeting readiness. Just remind the council that, you know, you'll have a fuller discussion tonight on those budgetary items, but staff's understanding is based upon previous discussions is that even if council moves forward with those budgetary items, you know, our recommendation would be if you do move forward, that first you have a policy discussion about hybrid meetings. And I think, and there are a variety of agencies throughout California that can provide us with best practices based upon their experiences. And then two, if council does move forward with hybrid meetings, that you do it as a pilot program, because I think we will learn throughout administering any sort of hybrid meetings, should council proceed in that direction, how to balance out in-person and virtual public comment, the technology, you know, what is it doing to meeting dynamics, public comment time period, et cetera.
Thank you. I think my intent in asking the question was just to clarify, mostly for the public, that, you know, as of whatever date there would be only, there'd be I think we would still have meetings on YouTube, right? So people could still watch, but just so they would know if they wanted to participate, they would need to be in person.
Yeah,
thank you.
Great follow-up, and just more information is if the council goes back in person on March 15th, even if the council were to approve budgetary allocations tonight for both staffing and equipment, we all know about the supply chain issues, and speaking with other managers throughout the state that some of which have ordered equipment back in September, they still don't have the equipment as of today. So it took them 3 or 4 months once they put the order in. And then the second piece, of course, is then having that policy discussion. So if council decides to make the investments tonight in both staffing and in hybrid meetings, I would imagine it would probably take us until June to have all the equipment in place at the earliest. And then there'd be the opportunity to have a policy discussion in conjunction with your supplemental budget deliberations about any policy or pilot program implications.
Thank you for those clarifications.
Thank you. How about Vice Mayor Christensen?
I was hoping you would then give us your opinion, Councilmember Shoresman. I want to go back in person. I want to go back on March 1st. So for me, March 15th is a compromise. I don't want to even deal with hybrid meetings, but I know until we've had a full policy discussion, which I don't expect to have tonight. And I think that at this stage, not only for the community's sake, but for the council's sake and our own work product, being in person is very important, as comes to no surprise to anybody.
Councilmember Shoresman.
I'll chime back in. Sorry, I was getting to the details and the logistics for the public, but I guess, short of having that policy level decision and discussion, I'm in favor of this general proposal and going back on March 15th. I guess assuming though that things continue to go the way we hope they go. If things take a drastic turn in the wrong direction before March 15th, then I would probably propose that we revisit it. But if everything goes, knock wood, cross fingers, the way it's going right now, then I'm fine with going back in person March 15th.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Pease.
Yes, I'm in support of the March 15th restart in person as well.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions for City Manager Johnson for his report?
To be clear, that we'll be moving forward with March 15th. It sounds like there's consensus to move forward with that date, absent any new compelling public health data that suggests otherwise that we should remain virtual.
City Manager Johnson, I thought we would appreciate this information right now from the council members, but wait until after the discussion from the budget to say, yes, move forward. Does that sound okay?
Yeah.
Well, this has nothing to do with the budget. This is just going forward. I mean, we're not talking, the whole thing about hybrid and all that is a completely different discussion. This is just being in person. We're not going to wait until.
Okay, I thought you needed more information around the hybrid equipment. Because if we don't, have the equipment, are we still moving forward? Was part of the conversation.
Yeah, I think on March 15th, if we go back in person, just to be clear, we would not have the technology to do hybrid meetings. So it would require people to be in person. If council makes the budgetary allocations tonight for both staff and equipment, I don't believe we'll be ready for probably the opportunity to show the equipment to the council, and then have a policy discussion about how we'll then balance out in-person and virtual participation.
Okay. Councilmember Marks, did you want to share your thoughts? Cannot hear.
You look like you're unmuted, but we still can't hear you.
Councilmember Marks, you may have to adjust your microphone just like you did your headset. Go to the corner, go to the microphone button again and go to mic, and you may have to change your settings.
It worked before the meeting. Maybe give us a thumbs up or thumbs down for now.
I cannot hear you.
She said thumbs up for going.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Jan.
We'll get tech support to give you a call so you can get your audio working.
Great, thank you. And yes, I'm happy with moving forward.
Oh, no, now we lost you, Erica.
I would be happy to go March 1st. Can you all hear me? Yeah, okay. This is kind of partially the reason, right? It would be nice. I am concerned around people not being able to put in their thoughts at the same time, but I think we have some good options, and I'm sure that staff can make some opportunities for those who need it to be able to put in comment in this similar kind of format in the future. And I also know that we can have emails, we can have video emails, we can have phone calls, we can have in-person meetings. I mean, there's a lot of ways to input to us as well. So I look forward to the next steps. Yes, and mailed letters. Thank you so much. I knew there was one more, it was in my head. So thank you very much. I hope that is helpful for you, City Manager Johnson.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Great.
Mayor, there's been a person with their hand up. I'm not.
Yes, thank you. I was going to move to public comment. Do we want to finish proclamations first, or?
I just wasn't sure if it was regarding something that was said in the city manager report.
Oh,
No, I didn't think so.
Oh, it's gone now. We're good.
Okay, thank you. Okay, technology. So do we have someone from the Diversity Coalition on the call? City Clerk, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. If they could raise their hand so I could. There is. I'm not seeing anybody.
Me either. Okay. Well, since the budget is such a large topic, I think we'll just go ahead and do the proclamation. If the Diversity Coalition ends up coming on, maybe we can share their thoughts right around public comment and move forward. So let me get back to the other screen. Okay, so today's proclamation in celebration of Black History Month. It's a long one, so go ahead and get your popcorn. So whereas there is no American history without Black history, and we take time each February to commemorate that truth. This month and beyond, we honor past and present, the many significant contributions made by the Black community. And whereas Black History Month grew out of Negro History Week, first proposed by scholar Carter G. Woodson in 1926, who chose the second week of February to coincide with the birthdays of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass, and was first celebrated by an act of Congress in 1986. Whereas this year's national theme of Black History Month focuses on the importance of Black health and wellness, acknowledging the legacy of not only Black scholars and medical practitioners in Western medicine, but also other ways of knowing, birth workers, doulas, midwives, naturopaths, herbalists, etc. throughout the African diaspora. The 2022 theme considers activities, rituals, and initiatives that Black communities have done to be well. And whereas the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States, when written, only applied to white land-owning men, not to African Americans, men or women. The very inception of our country embodies systemic racism, and the struggle for social justice of the civil rights movement to gain equal rights still continues in 2022. And whereas the San Luis Obispo City Council values diversity, equity, and inclusion, actively denounces systemic racism, created the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Task Force to listen and understand, and will actively work toward racial justice. And whereas the COVID-19 pandemic has brought to light even further inequality with Black and Brown communities disproportionately impacted by the virus and resulting in economic recession nationwide. And whereas the President of the United States has declared that the soul of our nation will be troubled as long as systemic racism is allowed to persist. It is corrosive, it is destructive, it is costly. We are not just morally deprived because of systemic racism, we are also less prosperous, less successful, and less secure as a nation. And whereas the city of San Luis Obispo recognizes that racial and ethnic diversity enriches our community and strives to lead with equity, continuing our support of the community's work toward full equality and representation, and has made diversity, equity, and inclusion a major city budget goal for 2023. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the city of San Luis Obispo does hereby proclaim February as Black History Month and call upon the people of our city to continue our efforts to create a world that is more just, equitable, and prosperous for all, not just in this month, but every day of the year. Well, I wish we were here, someone was here for the Diversity Coalition, but they will be here, I'm sure, at another time. So they're here in spirit.
You're on the committee.
Yeah, I'm a member, so there we go. All right, well, moving forward, I will get back to our agenda. So now is the time for public comment, and this is a public comment period for anything not on the agenda. So if anyone would like to speak that is currently in our virtual audience, this is a great time to raise your hand. I see at least one so far. And we will call the names 2 at a time. When your name is called, look for a pop-up and click where indicated so you can be promoted to a panelist to provide your comments. So City Clerk, do we have any comments at this time?
We have one. Fred, I'm going to promote you.
Hi, Fred, we can see you, but we cannot hear you yet. Not yet.
Another microphone to click. How about now?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, okay, I'll introduce myself. I'm Fred Starbuck. I'm a California native, lived on the Central Coast now for 20 years this year, and the last 10 here in beautiful San Luis Obispo. And I want to thank you all for all of your difficult work and challenges to keep the city as prosperous and pleasant as possible. I know it's got to be a difficult job. I don't envy it. So, I mean, all my comments here are intended to be helpful, even though I maybe bring up a few issues that are on my mind. So, and I spoke last 2 weeks ago on the speed bumps that are supposed to go in on Ocean Air and the street I live on, Atascadero, between Love Road and the lake. And I am quite against them. I understand a survey was done and it was in favor of it, but I don't know if the issue of injury from speed bumps was brought up. But if you search the web for it, you see a lot of stuff on injuries from speed bumps. And remember, the first thing of discomfort is the first step toward injury. And that's why speed bumps are there, to make people uncomfortable. So anyway, enough said on that. Jennifer Rice has been very helpful. I've talked to her on this too. But mainly, we walk every day to the post office area and the Madonna shopping center on the sidewalks, the beautiful new sidewalks. But the bicycles are now also on the sidewalks. And I don't quite understand that. My entire life, it's always been illegal to have bicycles on sidewalks. And I can see why now, because as we walk in front of the lake and down to the various sidewalks, routinely, you have to look behind you all the time because your bicycle will come racing by you at sometimes 15, 20 miles an hour. And there's going to be a catastrophe someday. Somebody's just going to get slammed, unfortunately. So I think that should be addressed somehow. I will give great kudos to the bike paths in Marsh and Higuera with a totally separate place, separating the traffic. I think is great. cars, bikes, and pedestrians don't mix well. But the worst is pedestrians and bicycles. And it is really a nuisance to try to keep yourself safe walking on these combined bike and pathways. So anyway, that's my comment. I'd love to hear more. I know the city manager mentioned something about talking to the police chief, but the sidewalks are marked for both. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Manager, did you want to respond?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So I've asked Matt Horn, our Public Works Director, and Luke Schwartz, our Public Transportation Manager, to provide some insights. So thank you for the comments. We always love the feedback. There's some new facilities that we're introducing to San Luis Obispo. And so we want to talk a little bit about the rules of the road and how they work in conjunction with other facilities.
Thank you.
Thanks, Derek, and thanks, Mr. Starbuck. I'm happy to elaborate on that. In the city of San Luis Obispo, he's correct that riding a bicycle on a sidewalk is illegal in our Muni code. And part of the reason is our sidewalks generally aren't really designed for bikes. There's signposts in the middle, there's inadequate clearances, and also the driveways aren't really designed for drivers to be looking both directions, having a clear line of sight for someone riding at a faster speed in the sidewalk. What you'll see on the new paths on Madonna Road, on Delidio, and on Firm Ranch Way are called Class 1 bikeways or shared use paths. They are designed for pedestrians and bicyclists to share. They have a wider width. There's also clearances for where signs and things like that can be placed. And also we handle the driveway conflicts a lot more carefully, make sure there's clear lines of sight and adequate markings and signage so that drivers are cued to be looking for conflicts in both directions. With that said, a lot of the Class 1 or shared use paths right along the streets were designed in our previous bicycle transportation plan. Our current active transportation plan really prioritizes directional protected bike lanes separate from pedestrians where right-of-way exists. So our preference is to separate bikes from cars and from pedestrians where we have the space to do so.
Thank you so much. And I don't see any other hands up. City Clerk, public comment?
No, that was it.
Okay, great. Oh, I see one more.
Okay, Mr. Nuts, I will promote you.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Hey, I just wanted to say, first off, thank you guys for holding this meeting to public comment. I think everything you guys have said so far has been really thoughtful, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to face the public. And just following that, I just wanted to say, Julie, I don't know if you're listening to this, but if you're still out there, I love you. Please take me back. I'm sorry I kissed the dog a couple of times and you caught me once, but I just want to say I still love you. Thank you guys for letting me speak.
Thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and move forward. I don't see anyone else on the attendee list. City Clerk?
No, that was it.
Great, thank you.
I just want to say that was definitely not on the agenda.
Correct. Correct. That's what public comment is for.
Therefore, there should be no further discussion.
All right, so we're going to move forward to the consent agenda, and the consent calendar items consist of matters deemed routine and non-controversial by staff. Unless a member of the council wishes to pull an item for individual consideration, all items will be approved by one motion. Does anyone wish to pull any items on the council? Or make a motion? Oh, thank you. Just kidding. Your public comment. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Mayor. If there's nothing to be pulled, we'll go ahead and move forward to public comment for the consent agenda. If there is anyone in the virtual audience that would like to make a comment on the consent agenda, this is your moment. Please do raise your hand. And I see at least one hand. And This again will be for the consent items only. City Clerk, would you like to call on the public comment?
Angela Tahiti,
Tati.
thank you.
Hi, Angela. Angela, if you're speaking, we can't hear you yet.
Unmute. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. I'm not sure I'm in the right place. It's item 6A on the budget items.
Not quite
Consent
yet.
or non-consent. Okay, then I'll get off and
Thank you so
come
much.
back later.
Thank you. It'll be
Thanks.
soon.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving forward, Vice Mayor Christensen.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and move the consent agenda.
Great, thank you so much.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Councilmember Marks. City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Vice Mayor Christensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Marks,
Yes.
Councilmember Pease,
Yes.
Councilmember Shorsman,
Yes.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes. Consent agenda passes 5-0. Thank you so much. All right, we now move forward to item 6A, our public hearing and business items, the fiscal year 2021 to 22 mid-year budget review. So we will go ahead and have a presentation first and questions from my colleagues, and then we'll move forward to the public comment on the budget review. So City Manager Johnson, are you starting? Oh, there's Brigitte, never mind.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So I will start off. We're going to go ahead and queue up the presentation. I'm joined here tonight by Brigitte Elke, our finance director, and Natalie Harnett, our budget manager. And so with that, the purpose of tonight is largely to bring forward our 2021-22 mid-year budget review. As the council may recall, we typically do this as a best practice and consistent with our financial policies to provide public transparency and insight about the city's progress on both reaching major city goals and how our revenues and our expenditures are performing halfway through the fiscal year. But as we all know, we've talked just as I presented the city manager report tonight, the last few years, and particularly this year, has been anything but normal. And so as we entered into the financial planning process, there was a tremendous amount of uncertainty about revenues and how they would ultimately evolve and how they would be realized. And Brigitte Elke and Natalie Harnett have done an amazing job of tracking our revenues and our expenditures. The good news tonight, and I'm happy to share this, is that there is a tremendous opportunity for the city council to augment and support our major city goals and the community priorities that were established through our community process. And we're going to walk you through all of those tonight. I'd be remiss, in not thanking the community and the council and our staff for the tremendous amount of trust that you put in us to be able to manage our finances. And I would say that the council's leadership in taking decisive and bold action throughout the pandemic that has really positioned us to make some once in a lifetime investments. I've worked in the public sector for nearly 30 years, and I can never remember a time like this where we've seen opportunities like this emerge. So tonight, our recommendations are to receive the staff report and our revised projections for all major funds at midpoint of the 21-22 fiscal year, and to approve a resolution that makes this particular appropriations consistent with the one-time and ongoing revenues that we have realized or will realize based upon our best professional judgment. Tonight, to help both the council and the public to keep track of tonight's presentation, You'll see at the very bottom of the slide is a presentation outline to help you kind of navigate through as we go through different portions of the presentation. Tonight's presentation, we think, will be about 30 minutes in length. And so we appreciate the council's patience, but we want to be very methodical and walking the community through tonight's recommendations. And so with that, just as I mentioned here previously, just to go back to our budget policies. So the mid-year budget review is a formal review of the city's financial condition and to amend appropriations if necessary 6 months after the beginning of each fiscal year. So how did we get here tonight? Of course, all of you remember back in the winter of, or fall of 2019, excuse me, fall of 2020 and the winter of 2021, when there was a tremendous amount of strategic planning and community input. And so that is really the basis for coming forward with the recommendations tonight. And that ultimately culminated in the adoption of the financial plan in June of 2021 that set forth the appropriations for the 21-22 fiscal year and then the budget estimates for the 22-23 fiscal year, which brings us to the red box, outline box, which is the mid-year review. And then we'll be coming back with the 22-23 supplemental budget and for the appropriations. Because the mid-year budget is something that we've never experienced before in the size and scale, I just want to advise both the council and the community that if the council moves forward with the recommended actions tonight, the supplemental budget will be largely perfunctory, meaning that the appropriations that we've estimated in the forecast for the 22-23 fiscal year would largely be left unchanged with some minor amendments, and we'll talk about those later tonight. So I'll look back at the 21-23 key financial objectives. We wanted to focus on our long-term fiscal health and align our fiscal and budget policies with our fiscal responsibility and sustainability philosophy. Another key element is to align budget resources with council adopted major city goals and strategies. And just to echo what I said earlier, is tonight is a continuing enhancement of that, is to meet also the minimum fund balances that we have for our working capital and our policy requirements. And I'm happy to say that this budget does all of that. It's also investing in the future. With specific investments in funding maintenance of existing infrastructure and investing in capital improvement programs. And you'll see that throughout tonight's recommendations. And on top of that, the council has been steadfast and clear since 2017 that we needed to make substantial and meaningful progress in paying down our unfunded liabilities. And tonight is part of the recommendations. And again, because of the careful stewardship of the city's finances, we're prepared with all funds to either through direct prepayment to CalPERS or investment in the 115 Trust to make nearly over $14 million in additional payments to CalPERS, which will get us to a 75% funded rate, which is the highest rate that we've experienced in over a decade. And then lastly, the key filter in which we're bringing forward tonight's recommendations is to implement the local revenue measure priorities. After the adoption of Measure G, the council committed by ordinance the establishment of the Revenue Enhancement Oversight Committee, and that committee, as part of the budget process, established priorities, and all of the recommendations for the local revenue measure have been brought forward to the Revenue Enhancement Oversight Committee, and they're recommending those for appropriation and action by the city council. So moving to the next slide. So setting the stage, we began the year in a strong fiscal position with a lot of uncertainty. And 2021 and 2022, the second half and leading in 2022 has been anything but uncertain. Who would have known that Delta would have surged during the summer months and that we'd have Omicron come back again? But Our resiliency and I would say the adaptability of our staff in carefully monitoring expenditures has meant that our expenditures are on track and our major revenue sources are exceeding projections. We do have some challenges we want to note with inflation and labor market supply shortages. I'll note that our fiscal forecast does take those into consideration, and the planned rate increasements and adjustments by the Fed. And just last week we met, and the mayor is, of course, part of this as part of the Investment Oversight Committee. We heard from PFM, our financial manager, about the outlook of the economy. And then, of course, we came forward in January with our published 2021 audited report. And that really helped us then cement and develop a baseline for updating our long-term forecast. And so where are we now? We're presenting to council a strategic path forward in alignment with the major city goals and the community policies and the financial plan objectives. So this isn't new. These are intended to augment the major city goals. I put those up on the screen for the council tonight. And we haven't done it per se, but I think it's fairly evident based upon the language of the four major city goals where there is that alignment with the proposed recommendations. So with that, if you can jump over to the next slide. The mid-year highlights is that we have potentially some areas that we continue to want to monitor, and that's our inflation, some labor shortage, and supply chain issues. We had the Delta and the Omicron variants, and we pulled back out COVID Mountain just so that you can all remember the journey that we've been on. And as we start to descend from COVID Mountain, there's been hills and valleys and peaks along the way. And the challenges that the fiscal year began is that we did put the fiscal health response plan on hold, but we're back on track. We had those continued uncertainties, and then we've had also emerging community needs, and those have been unprecedented, from housing issues, from issues on homelessness to the climate crisis. All of those issues are rearing their head at a time when there's a tremendous amount of uncertainty, and the city has had to step up in ways that we never would have imagined, providing services such as the mobile crisis unit and adding social workers as part of our response to supplement the work and the focus we hope to see from the County of San Luis Obispo, which is the regional lead coordinator on social and public health services. So the opportunities at the mid-year are that CalPERS prepayment of over $14 million to both the 115 Trust and to CalPERS. We are looking at an improved economic outlook, and this isn't just staff. We're using various different waypoints to guide us on our forecast, and that includes PFM, HDL, and Beacon Economics. And I want to just say that a portion of the ARPA funding that will backfill lost revenue due to COVID, and that did allow for investment into critical infrastructure. We just, after the first of the year, the federal government released the over 400 pages in guidelines and how the ARPA funding can be used. And tonight, as part of the presentation, the good news is that ARPA funding has exceeded our original forecast, and we're requesting direction, conceptual direction from the council about how you would like us to return as part of the supplemental budget for specific appropriations for ARPA. Moving on to the next slide, the path forward. Certainly, I would just echo the quote here is that we have had throughout the last 2 years on this journey had to find opportunity as it presented itself, and I think we've done that in spades along the way. The 21-22 revised budget is oriented towards sustaining the city's current operational levels while meeting the demands of inflation and balancing the service needs of the community. It contains immediate actions and resources for community priorities that emerged since July of 2021. And it takes immediate action to address labor market shortages and ensure that the city remains competitive to retain and attract talent. The council and the community hopefully had the opportunity to tune in on February 1st, in which we presented our compensation study, which showed that in order for the city of San Luis Obispo to attract people to provide services, that significant market adjustments were going to be required for the city to be competitive and prepare and make sure that our staff can provide services moving forward. And we've incorporated a lot of those budget adjustments into the forecast on a sustainable level. And with that, I'll turn it over to Brigitte, Elke, and to Natalie to finish up the presentation, and then we'll conclude and be ready to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Derek, and a very good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. And without further ado, let's just take a look at the mid-year status and the recommendations before you tonight. On the revenue side, it is largely good news that continues. Though the current two-year financial plan already took an optimistic view on most tax and fee revenue that the city receives, certain question marks most certainly remained, especially in the tourism realm. However, after a restriction lifted back in June of 2021, the city saw transient occupancy tax literally soar and reaching all-time highs as visitors flocked to the roads and took trips to drive-to destinations, which is also then infusing the city's sales tax base. Fee revenues that had also seen large reduction during the last year saw an equal recovery once programs were able to reopen. And we anticipate that this strong revenue growth will continue through 2023 until it probably will return to a more sustainable growth pattern in the outer years of the forecast. However, we have reduced our cannabis tax revenue for this year simply because only one of the three retailers is currently open and operational. The chart in front of you indicates the receipt of the American Rescue Plan Act funding during the current financial plan period, which skews the 5-year trend line that is seen here a little bit, but looks nonetheless promising over the entire forecast period. On the next slide, a look at the expenditure picture as we see it at mid-year. With the current financial plan, the city took on a very ambitious work and capital improvement program, and we are well underway with these efforts. At mid-year, all programs tracked well within anticipated levels and appropriated budgets. Contract services usually track on the high side since contractual obligations are usually committed in total, and the information provided in the report and see here in the chart considers these encumbrances as already spent. As outlined in the mid-year report, several programs are experiencing the impacts of a very tight labor market. The organization is using salary savings strategically to hire contract and consultant help to advance program objectives and is deploying creative approaches to try and attract talent. Of note is also that we are starting to see the effects of inflation, especially in the energy sector and for chemicals, but thus far we are actually able to mitigate the increases within the appropriated resources. Needless to say that we will continue to closely track and review the city's expenditures and all emerging trends as we go forward towards the third quarter review that will come to you in mid-May. Now, as your city manager has elaborated on, the mid-year budget review seeks multiple additions to the approved budget, utilizing one-time as well as ongoing resources, and seizing the opportunity to advance the strategic goals and priorities that were set by the community and the council through its major city goals. The one-time recommendations are connected to the city's audited financial results and the general fund's ending fund balance that is shown here on the slide. Due to the council's prudent decisions to leave fund balance intact during the COVID years, it is now in the position to come through on its obligation under the Fiscal Health Response Plan and make a substantial additional payment, the total of $12.4 million to CalPERS, with $10.2 million coming from the general fund. The overall fund balance that then ultimately shows, it shows an additional $5.3 million that remain in unassigned fund balance after accounting for all the committed balances and reserve policies. And that's really the bucket of money that we're utilizing for the investments that we see on the next slide, where we illustrate the use of approximately $4.8 million of that one-time unassigned fund balance. And that is in accordance with the goals set forth with the current financial plan. The recommendations look to invest about $640,000 in infrastructure and equipment, while $200,000 go to support core services of the city. And $3.95 million would support a challenge grant for the Slow Repertory Theatre for their new facility in the city's cultural corridor on Monterey and Nipomo. Though a subfund to the general fund in accounting terms, the city separately tracks its local revenue measure and provides a separate audit in accordance with its municipal code. On this slide, we show that the year-end result for the measure has also yielded an available unassigned fund balance. The report before you recommends uses for this funding as reviewed and supported by the Revenue Enhancement Oversight Committee that confirmed that all of the recommendations are in line with the community priorities set forth by the local revenue measure. For both the general fund as well as the local revenue measure, the recommendations do not use the entirety of the fund balance to provide flexibility as we go forward and finish out the fiscal year. Additionally, on the next slide, the emerging need of the community as well as the city organization seeks to take advantage of an improved long-term fiscal outlook. The recommendations make allocations of ongoing resources to further advance the major city goals, especially in support of the city's unhoused population, but it also makes further investments in the maintenance of the city's infrastructure and the urban forest, and core services to the community that actually include the ability to run hybrid council and advisory body meetings to maximize public participation. With the 2021-23 financial plan, the city implemented a capital reserve to protect the adopted infrastructure program against cost increases and unanticipated and emerging needs that we might see within the capital program. The adopted policy places up to 20% of the local revenue measure capital investment into that reserve on an annual basis. Amidst current inflationary and supply chain challenges, the reserve is now proving invaluable to advance important projects for the community as outlined on this slide. The reserve has a current balance of $3.2 million, and the recommendations included here at mid-year amount to about $1.8 million, leaving about 1.4 for the remainder of the fiscal year. And now on the next slide, we have additional recommendations that utilize resources from a multitude of different funds that the city maintains. They range from appropriations of carryover TDA funding to allocations from the Housing Fund, the Public Safety Equipment Fund, and a few other funding sources. The recommendations hence maximize these resources to further advance organizational and community-wide efforts as they fit into the fund's obligations. And with that, I will turn it over to your principal budget analyst, Natalie Hurnett, to go over the enterprise fund status at mid-year, as well as the major city goals and the capital and operating programs at mid-year.
Thank you, Brigitte. So taking a look at the enterprise funds, first we have the water fund. The pandemic brought quite a shift in water consumption from more commercial to residential, as a big part of the workforce shifted from working at an office to the work from home environment. With the return of Cal Poly students back to campus and businesses reopening, water sales and consumption are pretty much back to where they were at pre-pandemic levels. The pandemic also resulted in California placing a water shutoff moratorium, which restricts the city from turning off utilities, even if bills go unpaid. So as of January 5th, there's about $418,000 in past due water balances. This is about twice the amount compared to the year prior to the pandemic. Fortunately, the Utilities Department has applied for and received some funding from the state to help these customers impacted by COVID-19. Overall expenditures are on track for the water fund. The department is only recommending 2 minor adjustments at mid-year. The first is just to correct a costing for a position that actually should have been allocated under the sewer fund. The second is a fleet replacement for to replace it's actually two Priuses that unfortunately had their Cadillac converters stolen earlier in the year. So due to the age of the vehicles and the cost of the repairs, staff are recommending purchasing 1 new vehicle, which the cost will be split between the water and the sewer funds. So moving on to sewer, like water, the sewer fund is tracking in line with budget projections. It is also experiencing a huge jump in the past due bills due to the water shutoff moratorium, but the department will continue to apply for funding through the California Water and Wastewater Arrearage Payment Program to help customers with these past due balances. The fund is also currently assessing its sewer cap for the year, as the average water usage between December and February will provide the sewer maximum charge for residential customers for the year. Generally, the average during these 3 months is indicative of water being turned off in irrigation, which helps the department assess the true sewer usage. Due to the dry winter, this year's average may be impacted. There are 4 minor mid-year recommendations being brought forth within the report. The first is funding for additional wharf safety perimeter fencing materials, $260,000. The second is the administrative correction for the position that was mentioned on the last slide. We have funding for permit violation penalties, which we'll go into a little bit later in the presentation, and then the split costing for the new vehicle that was mentioned on the last slide as well. Next, we have the parking fund. Despite the adoption of the revenue enhancement strategies with the 21-23 financial plan, parking revenues are behind projections. The parking fund revenue shortfalls were largely driven by the reduced activity in downtown and the fund's assistance with economic recovery efforts. Additionally, the parking fund experienced delays with filling much needed vacancies that were tied to the enforcement and parking structure collections. So given this trend, the fund is projected to fall short of its necessary revenue to expenditures ratio needed to secure future iBank debt financing for the new parking structure. It's imperative to increase the revenues through maintaining the existing parking fees and increasing the usage of the parking facilities. So at this point, staff will be returning with a supplemental budget to present revenue strategies in order to ensure that the fund will be able to successfully meet its debt obligations and fund the new cultural arts parking structure. There are 3 budget recommendations, $45,000 for gateless parking garage equipment installation, a new security services agreement, and then a supervising parking enforcement officer reclassification. So this slide is a reminder on how the parking rates are established. The city actually has fiscal policies for all of its user fees and enterprise fees and rates. The city is currently in line with the the current adopted fiscal policies for the enterprise funds and reflect similar practices used by other public agencies in the area. So as shown in the chart, there's 4 different comparative agencies. SLO is at or below the median rate in the county. So the city currently enforces paid parking Monday through Saturday between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. and Sundays from 1 p.m. to 9 p.m. Paso Robles, for reference, is 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Pismo Beach is 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Cal Poly is 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. The city parking services continue to offer convenient and affordable parking options within its structures and encourages people to utilize the structures when possible. Another difference to note is that some of these agencies operate a little bit differently. So only the city of San Luis Obispo and Cal Poly actually manage and fund parking structures. These buildings are clearly both expensive and to construct and to maintain. So given that Cal Poly's rates are really the most comparable to the city, that Cal Poly is represented by the green bar on the left-hand side, and the city of San Luis Obispo is the dark blue kind of in the middle right. The city currently operates 3 parking structures and is in the process of constructing and funding a 4th structure. As previously mentioned, staff will return at supplement with revenue strategies to ensure that the fund is able to meet its debt obligations, fund the new parking structure, and remain in alignment with other agencies in the area. So the final enterprise fund is the Transit Fund. Federal Transportation Administration, or FTA funds, will be used to cover most of the operating and preventative maintenance costs of the vehicles. The city plans to use the new federal funding from the American Rescue Act plan, the ARPA funding, to help pay for electrical vehicle charging stations. This will help promote the electrification of the fleet. The fund is currently experiencing some operating savings due to the reduced ridership demands, but ultimately is on track with its budget. Several big pending items are coming down the pipeline for the fund. It will be establishing a new transit agreement with Cal Poly, and will also be issuing a new operations and maintenance contract. Both of these have the potential to impact the overall long-term forecast, but staff will keep council up to date on any of the developments during the quarterly reports. There's one mid-year budget request. It is for it's a capital request to relocate the 40 Prado bus shelter. Section D of the report provides a status update on each of the departments and their performance measures, as well as programmatic updates. Almost all of the departments, as mentioned before, are experiencing staffing challenges, absences, and vacancies, which ultimately lead to increased workload and reprioritization of tasks for the positions that are staffed. This explains why about 31% of the programs are experiencing a recalibration of their objectives or experiencing setbacks in day-to-day work programs. Despite the challenges, there have been many accomplishments over the last 6 months, and almost all of the 74 operating programs are categorized as green or yellow. Moving to the capital improvement plan, the 21-23 financial plan included a robust budget, which tripled the general fund's contribution to CIP due to Measure G20. In early February, Council received a management study of the city's capital improvement plan delivery process. Ultimately, there were many recommendations in the report, which included staffing increases, organizational, and process improvements. One of the recommendations that is included in the mid-year budget is actually to move funding, which was set aside for CIP delivery process improvements, into the operating budget to help fund for full-time positions and to help deliver the capital improvement plan. The CIP team is in the process of building a strong foundation of staffing to deliver both the current and the future needs in order to deliver on the ambitious CIP program. And we're excited to present more of that as the next couple quarterly updates go by and with the supplemental budget. Currently, the city is managing roughly 140 capital improvement plan projects, 5 of which are considered legacy projects, including the Prado Road interchange, the Prado Road Creek Bridge, and the Cultural Arts District parking structure. Seen in the photos here are just a few of the many projects that were completed or are actively in process this year. On the left, we have the Meadow Park pathway maintenance, which was completed earlier in the fiscal year, along with the Mission Plaza railing upgrade. We're also excited to be completing the next phase of the Railroad Safety Trail, which installed separate bikeways along California Street from Taft Street, along the railroad tracks all the way to Pepper Street. This project will be complete next month. Lastly, the report includes an update on the 239 major city goal tasks that were either scheduled for completion during the current fiscal year or were categorized as ongoing. Overall, 68% of the tasks have been either integrated into the city's ongoing work program or are scheduled to be complete on time. 31% of the tasks were delayed, and 2 of the tasks are currently on hold due to setbacks, but staff are working to find solutions in order to get those back on track. 12 tasks have been completed, including the hiring of a new ranger to help with open space maintenance, the support for a 25% expansion of the number of beds at 40 Prado, in addition to the completion of the zoning regulations update, and many others. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation back over to Brigitte to bring us through the last couple slides.
Thank you very much, Natalie. And we are moving right along with the substantial investment in CalPERS and a little bit closer look at the picture that we're seeing today. When considering the recommendation for CalPERS funding before you tonight, we really have to rewind a few years back to when CalPERS changed its approach to the unfunded pension liabilities of its 3,000 members. The city acted swiftly during that time to address the change and establish the fiscal health response plan with the goal to have excess revenue to pay down its liabilities ahead of the established schedule by CalPERS. It did so by negotiating concessions with its labor partners. It reimagined the way it does business, and it also looked at new revenue streams, such as the cannabis tax. Through this plan, the city actually paid the first installment of $4.2 million back in April of 2019. A subsequent $4.2 million payment was scheduled in 2020 that would have been followed by a $3 million payment in 21. However, finding itself in the midst of a worldwide pandemic, the council took a prudent approach to retain the available funding at that time to protect the community from any adverse effects from COVID-19 and the uncertainties that laid ahead with the onset of the pandemic. The entire unassigned fund balance was left intact during those crucial years. This action, together with an improved economic picture that we're presenting tonight, places the city in a position to now actually make good on the commitments by paying the postponed allocations together with a contribution that was scheduled for 2022. It invests about $12.4 million in total in the additional contributions and down payments to CalPERS. The picture here shows how this actually is distributed between the general fund and the enterprise funds. Notably, the general fund also includes the safety program under CalPERS. And on to the next page. We see that with the passage of the American Rescue Plan Act came good news for the city of San Luis Obispo that ultimately even improved after the initial confirmation of the funding. But before we look at the ARPA allocation, I wanted to just quickly address the two acronyms that are in play when we talk about the funding. We usually refer to the federal funding as ARPA. It's easy to and runs nicely off the tongue. So ARPA is actually the congressional act that provided the pot of money that is funding the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds program through which the city receives its allocation. A quick retrospective actually shows that the city was initially informed of $8.9 million under the program, and the funding was ultimately included in the financial plan adoption, since it closely aligned with the city's anticipated revenue shortfall that we saw in 2020. Since the ongoing pandemic required additional resources to operations in order to assist the community and its most vulnerable members, the ARPA funding was earmarked during the plan adoption to backfill reductions in the capital plan and was posted to the infrastructure investment fund to support these crucial infrastructure projects. Subsequently, we actually learned that the city was approved for a total of $13.5 million in ARPA funding, of which we have received the first installment on July 6 of last year. The second installment is expected a year later, which is aligning really well with the financial plan supplement. The Treasury's final rule allows the city to claim $10 million under revenue loss, which is the component of the rule that affords the city the most flexibility as it can apply the revenue loss towards any general government services. Since the city does not anticipate any further revenue loss as a whole, this option was a great addition under the final rule. However, ultimately, with $13.5 million in ARPA funding, $3.5 million will have to be allocated in accordance to the Treasury's final rule, and staff will return to the council with an appropriate programmatic approach for the review of the during the financial plan supplement. Now, on the last slide, we arrive at the last recommendation before the council tonight. The city's water resource recovery facility, also known as the WRF, is regulated through a state-issued regionally enforced discharge permit. Over the last year, the WRF experienced several discharge permit violations, in part due to the extensive use of disinfecting compounds that were deployed by the community to combat COVID-19. When introduced to the WRF, in these greater concentrations that we saw during the pandemic, these disinfecting compounds had a negative impact on the biological treatment processes utilized in the WRF. The impacts resulted in 4 separate permit violations, but after extensive analysis and research, as well as the use of a chemical additive that counteracted the effects, the WRF was able to return to compliance and negotiated dismissal of the citations in all 4 cases. However, unfortunately, 10 violations due to byproducts of the chlorine disinfection process remained. The upgrade project that is currently underway at the WRF is constructing an ultraviolet disinfecting process to replace the current chlorine-driven process that will bring the WRF back into compliance moving into the future. Staff is recommending tonight that council delegate to the city manager the authority to approve all future permit violation settlements in the amount not to exceed $50,000 to ensure that settlement payments for any mandatory minimum penalties be authorized to comply with the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. And that was our last slide and concludes our presentation. We'll bring it back to the recommendations before you and turn it back to the council to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much, Brigitte and Natalie. What a fantastic explanation of incredible amount of work. So do my colleagues have any questions to start? Councilmember Pease.
Great, thank you so much. Excellent presentation, and I really appreciate just the amount of coordination amongst all the staff that it takes to make all of this happen. So thank you for that. So I have a few questions. I'm going to start with a couple of the bigger ones. And then the first is I want to be able to, during deliberations, to be able to give some direction on the ARPA funds. So I want to start by asking about, well, I'm interested in seeing those ARPA funds be used potentially towards housing, affordable housing. And I'm wondering if either Brigitte or Derek can talk about, one, would that comply with the final rule and the utilization of that kind of housing? And then also, what would a process look like in order to be able to put that money towards affordable housing? I know we've talked conceptually about a notice of funding availability. And so I'm just wondering if you could kind of walk us through what some of the options might be for that type of use of those funds.
Yeah, I would be happy to address that, and maybe Derek will follow up with additional comments. It is absolutely applicable under the final rule. Actually, the final rule even extended to allow for capital project in the realm of the unhoused populations. So absolutely in alignment. It is important that whatever action we take, we move that by resolution and have really good backup in regards of the program that the City Council sets forth. We are under obligation to report to Treasury on a quarterly basis on the use of the funding. It is not necessarily strict as it pertains to the revenue loss, as it can be used for any general government services, but it will be good to even there have some documentation as to the prudent use of the funding. But everything that is tied to the rule is just imperative that we take appropriate action, record that, and then demonstrate the use in accordance to those actions under the reporting obligations. Again, just to reiterate, the funding has to be committed by the end of calendar year 24 and has to be expended by the end of calendar year 26. If not expended by that time, it will fall back to Treasury.
Thank you.
And Derek, I don't know whether you have any additional comments.
Yeah, just thank you, Brigitte, for explaining the rules and our reporting requirements. And Brigitte mentions the resolution because it's going to be important to memorialize the complete appropriation of dollars, so that when it does come time for us to report back to the feds, that there's a clear paper trail about how we've spent those dollars. With respect to the NOFA, I think we're in a very interesting time in terms of housing, affordable housing development. And there's a few projects that are out there that are targeting wraparound services and rapid rehousing projects that I think we'll want to take advantage of. Of course, I think the process would be that we would want to develop a NOFA, and this happens throughout the state of California, where there's input on the NOFA process for people to be able to comment on the proposed guidance, so that ultimately, if the city moves forward with any sort of appropriation of ARPA dollars, and we release a program document for award of those dollars, that they're consistent with the guidance. And then most importantly, that they're relevant and germane to what the housing community is seeing the need, and that it really fills the gap so where we can deliver housing in a timely fashion.
Great, thanks so much. I have some other smaller questions or comments, but I'm going to let my colleagues go first on theirs, and then maybe circle back. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Marks.
Thank you. Yeah, I had a question about the reimbursement for 600 tank farm improvements, which I'm very enthusiastic about those improvements. But I am curious if the city will in turn be reimbursed as well. In other words, does the dollar amount represent our fair share as a city? Or are there other developments that are going to, in the future, reimburse us for what we would possibly be allocating tonight?
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So I brought over Matt Horn to provide some detail about the distribution of costs for that facility. This is a project that's paid for by multiple sources, direct developer contribution, airport area specific plan. And then the third component is the city's fair share. So Matt, if you could talk a little bit about the funding and how it will work and who's going to build it and the reimbursement proposal.
Sure, Derek. And actually, I'd like to phone a friend. If you could bring over Luke Schwartz to talk in detail about this.
He's there.
Perfect.
Yeah, I'm happy to, and it's a great question. Those improvements are being funded through a combination of sources. So you have direct developer contribution from the 600 tank farm project for their fair nexus to the improvements that are needed. There's also a contribution from our traffic impact fee program, both through fee credits that the developer would normally be paying in, but instead they're getting credits for the portion of those costs for the improvements they're building. They're also getting reimbursed from traffic impact fees that other adjacent developments are paying into the fee program that also benefit from those improvements. And then finally, there's a portion of the need for these improvements that's driven from traffic and demand that's either existing or from regional trips that never have an endpoint in the city. We cannot legally charge new development to pay for those costs. So those are coming from the local sources that represent the trips that are either local or regional that can't legally be charged to new development projects. So it's a combination of those sources to fully fund that project and make the reimbursement whole.
Thank you. So it sounds like the city will, to some extent, be partially reimbursed for what we are considering forwarding this evening. Is that correct?
Any of the costs that the city are coming from city funds are basically the city or existing development share. The costs, the fees that are coming in from new development, the city's not fronting those. The developer is taking the risk of moving forward with construction with the intent that when those other developments, so examples are the adjacent projects on tank farm. So we have 650 tank farm next door and northwest corner. They're already entitled. They have building plans and improvement plans in for review. They'll likely be paying their fees in the next year or so as they move forward and build. We'd be collecting those fees and turning those back around to the 600 tank farm developers. So it's not the city funding those costs, it's other development contributing and us basically passing it through when those fees come in.
All right, thank you. That's my last question.
Thank you, Councilmember Shorsman.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to go back to maybe a little more detail about Councilmember Pease's question about the final rule and the 3.5 million versus the 4.7 million in ARPA funds that's left over. Can you explain that a little bit? I'm not sure I understand what the difference is around the rule and the 3.5 versus the total 4.7.
Yeah, so it's a few different elements in play. And I think part of it is what we were first informed we would receive, what our revenue loss calculation was, what we then received in final rule as the possible one-time allocation under revenue loss, and the ultimate total funding that the city will receive. So the different components come into play by considering that first we were told we get about $8.9 million. That coincided very, very closely to ultimately what we also calculated under the revenue laws for 2020. So that was then planned into the financial plan and is now held in the Infrastructure Investment Fund to come through on some of those trade-offs that were moved into operations versus the capital plan that was originally funded and anticipated. Subsequently, we learned that we will get $13.5 million, so showing now that $4.6 million gap between that initial funding and coinciding with our revenue loss and the ultimate funding that the city will receive. However, since we now can actually take a $10 million loss if we choose, and we don't have to demonstrate that. Treasury has now come in. Hey, if it's advantageous for your community to just say, hey, $10 million it was, without further calculation, we can apply that, giving us most of the flexibility under general government services, tying only $3.5 million to the final rule. Even so, $4.6 million have not been allocated yet, considering the original allocation within the financial plan.
So then how does that restrict that? When we go to allocate it and utilize it, how does that restrict our use of that?
So basically, what it means is that of that 4.6, that was the delta between the initial 8.9 and the 13.5, another $1.1 million can be used under revenue loss, giving you all the flexibility to just say general government service, that's what we're going to use it for. And there is really, under final rule, not much obligation for reporting in regards of the use. However, the $3.5 million is very closely tied to the final rule, giving you about 4 different options how to use the funding, which is rather restrictive actually for a municipal corporation, because it takes a lot of the funding options into social services and very little into the infrastructure realm. For instance, if you look at infrastructure, you can fund water, sewer, and broadband. That's it, basically, under final rule. The only leeway we have, if you look at the general fund, is that within sewer, they allow for stormwater projects. That's really the only tie, unless you have a substantial broadband type of project that you would like to advance. Other than that, it really comes down to the housing realm, as well as services to the unhoused that you have most certainly invested in heavily during the COVID years and within these financial plan, and are contemplating going forward. So it's relatively restrictive, but we will come back to let you know what all the options are as you contemplate the use, and give us direction maybe in what of the options would most align with your goals.
Thank you.
It's a little bit convoluted, but hopefully it explained all the moving pieces that are in play.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. The other question, 2 other questions. One is with relation to most of the recommendations that are made in the report, it looks like many of the categories that the funding is broken down into, there's a remaining balance. It looks like the budgeting has been pretty conservative to make sure that I'm assuming to make sure that we have enough money to cover everything in each of the line items that's delineated out, which I appreciate the conservative approach. I'm just wondering, with those remaining balances, if the estimates are pretty right on, there is a fair amount of money left over at the end. Would that then come back to us in the supplemental to propose for funding?
We
Other
might
projects?
we might see a further alignment in the forecast depending how we actually see revenues come in over the next few months. Ultimately, it would always find its way into the audited financial and ultimately into your fund balance. That then is further at your discretion to utilize if we have any unassigned fund balance once we looked at all our reserve policies, etc. But if it's not considered a supplement, depending where revenues come in, if it remains, is not used further, as you mentioned correctly, Councilmember Shorsman, we want to still be a little bit on the conservative side, since still certain uncertainties are afoot, and most certainly certain trends that are now coming out of the pandemic that we did not initially probably anticipate with the vehemence we're seeing it right now. But there are options at supplement and ultimately, again, with fund balance as we go through the audit.
Okay.
Hop in here, Councilmember Shorsman, and just draw your attention. You know, we did assume in the financial forecast, and I'll just draw your attention to the page 123 of the packet. If you look out down at line 47, those fund balances are built into the long-term forecast and assumed as not being spent. So they're needed to essentially carry through some of the expenditures in the outer years. So while it might appear that you've got the funding, at least if we carry out the assumptions over a 5-year forecast, and a forecast is a forecast, it's not a budget. You know, what we see is in line 47, that outer year under the column titled projected 2025 to 26, we see the number drop down to 75,000. So what that tells us, if you assume that you know, that all the projections we have based upon the econometrics that we built into the model, if we spend any of those fund balances beyond the appropriations that we've recommended, at least in the outer years of the forecast, not in the budget, in the forecast, those could potentially turn negative. And I emphasize forecast because they're, you know, 5 years from now is a long, long time, and a lot of things will happen. But a best practice that we use is to do this on a 5-year basis, so that we make sure that at least we're looking over the long-term horizon to make sure we're not making any commitments that have any long-term structural issues.
Okay, I think I asked that question specifically because I see, well, I can comment more later about one area in particular. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Christensen.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I appreciate the questions about the ARPA funding. I didn't actually come prepared to talk about any recommendations because my understanding was that this was going to come back to us with, yeah, so we can make comments if you want, certainly, but I didn't come prepared to talk about ARPA and to make any recommendations. I just wanted to be clear. I was confused there for a minute. I thought that's what we were supposed to be doing tonight, and I'm thinking, what? How did I misunderstand that? But I'm understanding that that is not actually what we're being asked tonight, although we certainly can if we want.
I was not planning to either, Vice Mayor Christensen, if that helps anybody else's discussion, but I can't hear anybody else talking right now.
I'm sorry, the questions, I haven't finished yet. The questions that you were asking, Michelle, about the details about what's restricted and what's not, I need to know all that before I start telling you stuff. And I don't know any of that. I really paid no attention to it because I thought it was coming back to us. So just wanted to make sure I'm understanding what it is I'm being asked to do tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Brigitte, on page, oh boy, let's see. Budget report, page 3. There's the chart that says sales tax Q3 20 compared to Q3 21. And I'm just wondering, any chance you have any idea around Q3 2019, because I think it would be nice just to see pre-COVID versus during COVID, what those numbers look like. And if you don't, that's completely okay. I'm throwing that out there to you today.
Right, yeah, we probably can follow up with that. I don't know whether we can readily bring that up. We can most certainly look for it and maybe come back later in the discussion or comment once we can put our finger on the presentation that included that information for comparison, if that is of interest.
Great, thank you. I have one more. And I think City Manager already answered this for me, but I just love to have it in public. There was a budget report page 41, and talking about all the collisions under the police department. And I was just curious, we're talking about traffic collisions in May around fatalities, injuries, et cetera, but we're looking at this and kind of almost making decisions now. So I just kind of wanted to hear a little bit more, City Manager, about the traffic injuries, fatalities in comparison to this chart.
We can't hear.
We align our annual traffic safety report with our financial process. So we typically, consistently use that report to have data-informed decision-making about investing in capital improvement projects that address intersections, roadway segments that have the highest incidence of accidents, injury, et cetera. And so we did that as part of the financial plan leading up to today. And then we'll do that again here in a few months. And Luke, if you could just jump on, we'll be presenting the data from the last couple of years, which then we'll bring back out in the fall as we start doing what's called setting the stage to remind the council and the community of the report. So it's kind of a two-step process. We present it in May. And then as we get into setting the stage, we'll pull that back out and council's reminded of those intersections and roadway segments that we believe, are the highest priority to look at in terms of accidents, et cetera. And so Luke, if you want to jump in and just supplement that.
Yeah, thanks, Derek. And Madam Mayor, it's a good question. We actually are coming before you in March, so sooner than you're hoping for. Or sooner than you're assuming with our most recent traffic safety report. As Derek mentioned, it's a data-driven process. A lot of our focus now and moving forward as we look ahead at best practices to reduce collisions, we're really focusing on the most severe types of collisions where people are more likely to be injured or killed, not just reducing overall collisions and fender benders. And a big part of that is looking at systematic things that we can do, not only to address where collisions are already happening, but the types of locations and contexts that these really severe collisions are occurring at, so that we can focus our capital projects and enforcement efforts and programs to address those. As Derek mentioned, what you'll see when this item comes before you next month in the staff report and in the more detailed analysis that's included is a list of what we recommend we can do within our current safety budget that's already allocated, and then also what we think are important capital projects that you'd be seeing coming forward as future budget requests for larger, more complex types of improvements that we think are really needed.
Thank you so much. Yes, you're right, March 15th, sorry about that. No, and I mentioned it just because typically we'd have this a report how we're doing at the mid-year, great. And then we'd be having a discussion about the collisions. And then come October, so we start to gain the information from the community and start the whole financial plan all over again. So seeing where these collisions are, and how traffic is affected, we'd really be talking about in spring of next year. But because of this ARPA funds and local revenue measure, we actually are lucky enough to have this extra money to spend right now. Thank you. Council Member Pease.
Great, thank you so much. Just a couple little wrap ups here. One is I didn't mean to jump ahead too much on the ARPA. It's absolutely a discussion further down the road. I think that there was an indication that if council had a particular direction we wanted to see it go, then that would be give staff a head start as they prepare for that in June. And it is it's very relevant for me for today, because we have this significant funding opportunity with our current budget, and some really amazing things going on in this budget. I'm really excited about there, and we'll talk more during deliberation. But it's influential because, for example, I think there's an appropriate allocation. Again, we'll talk about it more, but from where I am, an appropriate allocation to the slow rep. And in thinking about that kind of allocation, I also want to be able to make sure that we're also making some significant headway towards housing our most vulnerable folks. So to be able to do one, I want to make sure we are also able to do this other one down the road when we get there. So that was the timing of the discussion. Kind of a similar but a smaller scale question I wanted to check on. I did hear from, well, we have at the city a fabulous grants and aid program through the HRC for social services and nonprofits to be able to support their work in the community. It's $150,000, and we consistently get much larger asks. Not all of them are going to be an appropriate match, but I do want to maybe ask staff, and then we can again circle back for a discussion. If we are seeing that perhaps an additional 100,000, if either there's room in our current budget, or if that would be kind of another look ahead to consider an ARPA. But is that even kind of being seen as a critical need, or is it something that maybe at the next year's budget we can have a broader conversation at HRC? So a little bit of throwing it out there, but I did have some folks from the community saying about how they were feeling like, gosh, it sure would be nice to be able to get a more robust fulfillment of those funding requests.
Member Pease, and to answer your question is, first, I think that the council could do that, give us that direction. We're in the middle of the process right now with our funding. I brought Michael over. He can talk a little bit about where we are. The good news is that while the decision and the allocation and the ultimately about how we're going to make fundings, the actual expense doesn't happen till next fiscal year. And so from a cash flow perspective, in terms of keeping a balanced budget, here again, Brigitte, if you could talk a little bit about whether that concept would be consistent with the ARPA rules, because that would be my recommendation to pull from the ARPA funding if the council is interested in doing that. And then Michael could talk about overall the need over the past and how that need has aligned with the resources the council has appropriated to the general fund.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. Yes, under final rule, you can actually give grants to subrecipients. So as long as those subrecipients work within the realm that is also applicable to the final rule. And that is essentially what you're alluding to, right, within the context of the needs of human relations related organizations. And so, yes, subrecipients can indeed receive funding from the city under ARPA.
And then I'll just give an update on where things stand right now with the process for grants and aid. The application period is closed, and as usual, the city is oversubscribed. We've received over $300,000 of grant requests for the $150,000 of funding that's available. A lot of quality applications that would benefit from additional funding. I just would like to highlight that the subcommittee of the Human Relations Commission will start meeting at the end of this month, early next month, to review those applications and develop their recommendations for the full Human Relations Commission. And the HRC makes their recommendation to the City Council in April, and then we'll, once that occurs, we'll bring that recommendation forward to the City Council. So with direction from the City Council tonight, we could look, at either, if we had clear direction from the City Council tonight, we could simply ask the subcommittee to program the additional $100,000 in terms of their recommendation. Since it's the timing, this kind of has come up today, maybe another way we could do that is to have that be a separate exercise. If there was an extra $100,000 HRC subcommittee, how would you recommend that it be spent? So I think if it's a question that a majority of the council is interested in pursuing, we could take a look at how the HRC would recommend spending that additional $100,000.
Great, thanks so much. Those are my questions.
Great, thank you so much, Michael. We're going to, it's 8:08. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back to questions and, public comment and council deliberation. So if you are on the call and like to provide a public comment, go ahead and raise your hand. In about 10 minutes when we get back, we will come back to you. Thank you. Thank you for coming back so quickly. Okay, so before we head to council deliberation, we'll have public comment, and that's public comment for anything on this one budget item, not the next item, in case you're curious. And right now I have 11 people. City Clerk, do you have anyone else for public comment? And I'll just go ahead and say one more time, just in case. If you have a comment on the mid-year budget review, feel free to raise your hand at this time, and we will call on you. We'll go ahead and call on 2 names at a time. When your name is called, look for a pop-up and click where indicated so you can be promoted to a panelist to provide your comments. City Clerk?
Molly Kern and Angela Tahiti.
Tati.
Thank you.
Hello, Mayor Stewart and members of the council. This is Molly Kern speaking to you tonight on behalf of the San Luis Obispo Chamber of Commerce. I'm here to just share our appreciation for the work that you're discussing tonight and to support the proposed investments that make wise use of additional funds and further your adopted major city goals. When your team came to speak to our Economic Development Committee last fall, our committee and our board of directors were particularly excited to hear about the payments that are going to address the unfunded pension liability and in the long run save our city a ton of money, as well as investments in economic development and cultural assets that'll have a strong ROI for decades to come. Finally, the infrastructure investments that advance safety as well as our housing goals through both maintenance and capital improvements were another highlight amongst the investments you're considering tonight. I also want to emphasize our gratitude for your approach and investments in key programs like Open Slow, the thoughtful considerations made by REOC about the spending of Measure G tax dollars, and as one of our members put it, your staff's get it done mentality over the last few years. All of this work has been instrumental in getting to the place we are today, poised to make these unprecedented investments into our future. Your major city goal process has long been a valuable way to garner community input, identify priorities, and develop programs, but the value is even greater this year as it seamlessly allows you to efficiently and appropriate direct these once-in-a-lifetime funds. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
After Angela, it's going to be Bettina Swigger.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Good evening, Mayor Stewart, council members, City Manager Johnson, and staff. Angela Tati here, and speaking on behalf of Waterman Peace Village. It's a joint vision of smart share housing solutions and the Peace Project view via ecologistics. We'd first like to voice our support for the SLO Repertory Theater Challenge Grant. Through an exclusive negotiating agreement, SLO Rep has been diligent in working with the city to plan for improvements, demonstrate ability, and project positive economic impact. We value the Arts and Culture District and recognize SLO Rep as an anchor agency. We think they are very important to the recovery, resiliency, and sustainability of downtown. So similarly, Smart Share Housing Solutions and Ecologistics entered into an exclusive negotiating agreement with you, the city, in September for Waterman Peace Village. Centered at 466 Dana Street, the three-phased project would begin with the renovation of the historic Rosa Patron adobe. And then it would bring an innovative, affordable housing village. A model of sustainable living, which encourages walking and bicycle riding, use of downtown, a diverse group of residents, hard hit by what I call pandeconomics, selected not just for their socioeconomic status and community representation, but also for their community mindedness and interest to steward the historic property, its treasured trees, and the creek overlook. In phase 3, alas, a new studio built of straw bale to expand the resident and public uses for arts, culture, and heritage. All the public spaces would comprise an interpretive park, which acknowledges the first people, the Northern Chumash, the flora, the fauna, and the heritage of this special downtown lot. So our goals are your goals. As key community partners, we are very committed to housing, diversity, equity, and inclusion, climate action, and economic resiliency. There may be a good match with our affordable housing plan for the ARPA funds to be discussed in the future. I just wanted to say that budget presentation was wonderful, and I appreciate everything that you are doing as city stewards. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Bettina, and after Bettina, it's going to be Kelly Donahue.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for this wonderful presentation from the city staff. My name is Bettina Swigger. I am the CEO of Downtown SLO, which is the city's collaborative partner nonprofit agency for economic vitality in our downtown. And on behalf of our board of directors, our staff, and the hundreds of businesses that make up our membership, I would like to thank the council and staff for the considerable investments in downtown in this mid-year budget review. Your investment in downtown programs, projects, and infrastructure pays off. Downtown is a major driver of revenue in both resident and visitor spending, with more than 100 retail shops, 80+ dining options, 40+ salons and spas, and numerous other businesses ranging from architects to engineers to designers and entrepreneurs. Downtown is the second biggest driver of sales tax revenue in our city, and that's just because, well, big car dealerships don't really fit in with the downtown aesthetic, nor necessarily with zoning regulations. The good news is that downtown in general has weathered the pandemic fairly well, and we have a low vacancy rate. We've been working with city staff and a volunteer task force to develop a vibrancy and vacancy tracking system, which includes a GIS map and a dashboard. And currently the vacancy rate downtown is at about 7%. In fact, 21 new businesses have opened downtown since the fiscal year began. We've seen existing businesses expanded into larger spaces, and a healthy mix of local and national businesses are set to open later this year. We believe that's in large part because the city of SLO understands the value of investing in downtown and creating an environment that's good for business. Our organization has been tested by the pandemic, but since the fiscal year began, we've been able to bring back treasured community events like concerts in the plaza, where we provided 8 weeks of free live music for the community in the heart of downtown. Thanks to the additional budget allocations for landscape and lighting improvements, the 2022 series will take place in a more beautified and welcoming environment in Mission Plaza. We've also substantially grown the Thursday night farmers market, which was recently named the best farmers market in the state by Eat This, Not That. And the market is doing its part to help fight hunger and food insecurity. Since mid-May, the market has distributed over $27,000 in food access benefits as a host site for the EBT CalFresh program. And through our partnership with Glean Slow, we've contributed 11,000 pounds of donated produce distributed through the local food bank. So thank you to the city for providing logistical and public safety support for the Thursday night farmers market. And we really appreciate that additional allocation in this budget reforecast. Downtown is also the cultural hub, and I know you're going to hear from some other speakers here in a minute, but our organization is really excited to see the cultural corridor bloom, and we're especially excited to see this investment in the Slow Rep Theater project. So we enthusiastically support the Slow Rep Challenge Grant, and thank you for your continued investment in downtown, and we look forward to working with you to achieve the major city goal of downtown vitality.
After Kelly will be Kevin Harris and then Ellie Washington.
Good evening, Mayor Stewart and council members. My name is Kelly Donahue, speaking on behalf of myself as a business owner and an under 40 community member. I wanted to share my deep appreciation for the work discussed this evening. I've appreciated the initial goal setting process and that these investments are in line with those set goals, including capital improvement projects that are deeply needed, the investment in that necessary infrastructure while also meeting the safety needs of our cyclists and pedestrians. Investments in economic development, especially in light of the ongoing pandemic and need for community and business support, as well as investments in projects that maintain and protect our natural environment, like the Open Cell program. I've also seen firsthand how the Measure G tax dollars have been spent and has made the community a more vibrant, livable, and safe place to work and live. And further, I've appreciated the city's ability to be adaptable and nimble with those funds in these uncertain times. Thank you for your time.
Kevin Harris, Ellie Washington, and then Catherine Luckett.
Great. Can you hear me all right? Great. Mayor Stewart and honorable council members, thank you so much for considering our grant request. My name is Kevin Harris, and I've been the managing artistic director of Slow Rep since 2008. In our application, we detailed the project's many economic and cultural benefits to San Luis Obispo. So tonight, I wanted to briefly share our vision of what we expect to do inside this new theater, because that is truly the driving force behind our determination to complete this project. So let's jump ahead to 2030. Slow Rep is in its third full season in our new theater, drawing more than 50,000 patrons annually. We are celebrated as a smartly designed downtown venue with 2 stages, the main stage seating 210 and the Black Box Theater seating 100. On our main stage, we are producing 162 performances a year while offering 47 days for use by other community groups. Our lineup will include 8 productions, each running 3 to 5 weeks, and most of these will be musicals and comedies, as we aim to attract the widest possible demographic of theater goers to our main stage. In our Black Box, we are producing 162 performances a year while offering 80 days for use by other community groups. These productions will include 5 great plays and musicals that are more suited to the intimate nature of the Black Box, and will also include at least 2 premiere productions of new plays, 5 staged readings, at least 2 of which will be workshops or presentations of new plays commissioned by Slow Rep, 2 productions from our Academy of Creative Theater produced and performed by young artists in this community, and 26 piano bar cabaret events performed by nationally recognized musicians who are also working in our main stage productions. From an artistic standpoint, this new building will, of course, give us an opportunity to produce higher quality theater. But more importantly, It will allow us to become a real part of the artistic conversation nationally. And why is that important? Because being a part of that conversation will help us attract diverse casts. It will help us attract the best actors and playwrights, both established and upcoming. Being a part of that conversation will help us draw full houses, including a more diverse representation of tourists. And that's how we will grow artistically and financially. That's how we will help downtown SLO thrive. That's how we will enrich the cultural vibrancy of the Central Coast. And that's finally how we will help people think about our shared humanity through the power of live theater. Thank you for considering helping us get there.
Ellie Washington, Catherine Luckett, and Dave Christie.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me? Yes? All right. Evening, Mayor Stewart, council members Christensen, Marks, Pease, and Shoresman. I'm Ellie Washington, and I have the honor of serving as Vice President on the SLO Rep Board of Directors and of speaking on behalf of the board tonight. I won't summarize all the points we made in our letter seeking approval for this challenge grant, but on behalf of the board, I want to be crystal clear on one point. Our board is firmly committed to raising $10.5 million toward this project. We can make this commitment because of the foundation you laid by providing a downtown lot to build on. We can make this commitment because of our incredible community of supporters who believe in this shared vision and have bolstered us to raise more than $5.5 million already. And we can make this commitment because the challenge grant will help propel us across the finish line. Together, we will get this theater built, and it will be a city-owned asset for generations to come. My belief in this project goes far beyond my passion for the performing arts. When my husband and I were deciding whether to move to SLO nearly a decade ago, several factors were important to us beyond salaries and cost of living. Was this a supportive community for young professionals like us? Was this a supportive community for biracial families like us? In my work as a local realtor, fellow young professionals and families of color asked me those same questions. Is SLO a community for us or just for students and retirees? I'm not going to pretend that a new theater building by itself is going to guarantee a community for all, but a thriving arts and culture scene is a critical piece of that social and economic equation that yields a robust and diverse downtown. This project is so much more than a building. It's an opportunity to build community, enhance our quality of life, and help transform our downtown. This theater will become the beacon of our long-awaited cultural district. In addition to the greatly expanded repertoire of musicals, plays, and theater education programs we'll be able to offer in these new spaces, this project will also provide a welcoming space for local organizations to host their own cultural events. The work we'll be doing will fulfill our mission of connecting people in ways that open the mind, nourish the soul, and illuminate our shared humanity. Thank you for your consideration, and we look forward to celebrating with you center stage in 2027 in the new theater.
Catherine Luckett, Dave Christie, and Charlie Beck.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Well, you can't see me, but I'm here. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. And thank you for considering the SLO Rep Challenge Grant. My name is Catherine Luckett, and I have the privilege of chairing the SLO Rep Capital Campaign Steering Committee. You have in your packet a letter from the steering committee endorsing the project, so I won't repeat that. Instead, I'd like to tell you why my husband and I are so enthusiastic about this project and why we think you would be doing a great service to our community by approving this grant. As I mentioned, I chair the Capital Campaign Steering Committee. My husband, Richard Luckett, serves on the SLO Rep Board of Directors. We are passionate about SLO Rep and we serve with enthusiasm. We've pledged a lead gift to this project, and we look forward to realizing this thrilling new theater in 2027. Richard and I made this pledge because we've witnessed the impressive artistic growth of this organization under Kevin Harris's remarkable leadership over the past decade, and we have complete confidence in his vision for the future. Another reason for our pledge is simple. We love San Luis Obispo. We have lived in San Luis for 41 years. We raised our family here, we made our living here, and we are invested. The money we pledged is not inherited wealth. Richard and I have prospered in this community, and we feel fortunate to be able to give something truly significant to the place we love. SLO Rep has served San Luis Obispo for 75 years, and we have no doubt SLO Rep will deliver even more value to our community in a new state-of-the-art theater. SLO Rep is ready to do more for the city. This challenge grant is an opportunity for us to make progress together in a true public-private partnership. Thank you all for your consideration. Oh, it asked me to start my video. Oh, well, okay. A little bit late. I don't know. Did I? Oh, am I starting again?
No, that's okay. We just
Hi, Andy.
Hey, thank you for your comments.
Sorry about no face. Oh, well, that's all right.
Our next speaker is Dave Christie, then will be Charlie Beck, and then Melody Kelman.
Over the thing and it says fast you screen.
Good evening. My name is Dave Christie. When I served for 9 years as Dean of the Business School at Cal Poly, I chose to become involved in our community from the perspective of economic development. I firmly believe that a vital economy helps attract and retain the kinds of families who want to live and work in an optimistic environment, the kinds of citizens who are inspired to give back to their community, and the kinds of taxpayers willing to pay for important social services. In my view, SLO Rep can be an important factor in what I call big E economic impact, the kind of impact that attracts ambitious people to grow their families and businesses here, precisely because they are attracted to the energy, charm, and institutions they see in this community. This is economic impact beyond tickets purchased and dinners consumed. This is the impact that contributes to our community's identity and to our community's vitality. It's an interesting paradox that some of the things about which our community is known aren't experienced by every resident or visitor. For example, there are weekend visitors who have never been to our famous Thursday night farmers market, but they know all about it, they talk about it, they think it's cool. Everyone doesn't ride a mountain bike on our incredible open space, but they describe those hills to their friends like they're up there every day. The same will apply to the SLO Rep Theater. As Bettina Swigger, CEO of Downtown SLO, wrote to you, downtowns that house cultural institutions like theaters have more cohesive identities and invoke more community pride in local residents. And as Chuck Davison, CEO of Visit SLOCal, wrote to you, a new theater will reinforce SLO's reputation as a dynamic place to live, work, and visit. I have no doubt that if you approve the SLO Rep Challenge Grant, you will not only energize donors to dig a little deeper, but you will enrich our city's reputation for thinking big and for getting good things done together. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you today.
Charlie, then Melody, and then our last speaker is Chip Bishi.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right. Hello, Madam Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Charlie Beck, and I am speaking on behalf of the San Luis Obispo Repertory Theater, and more specifically, the Academy of Creative Theater program. I've been a proud participant with ACT for the past 6 years, and I've spoken on behalf of ACT previously when I was 12 years old. Now I'm almost 16. These past few years have been difficult, and there's been hardly any live theater at all, but being able to perform on Slow Rep's new stages before I go off to college would show the strength and pride that our city has in its arts programs. ACT at Slow Rep has truly changed my life. It has given me a sense of self and more confidence and self-awareness than I ever thought I could have. Not only have I noticed these changes in myself, but in my peers as well. The things that I adore the most about the ACT program is the amount of love that everyone has for everyone else, and how we've been able to create such an open and accepting environment for the young people in the city. I have met lifelong friends through this program, and my relationships with them, as well as with the wonderful Slow Rep staff, have made me a smarter, more passionate, and well-rounded person. The experiences I have gone through participating in theater with ACT have helped me feel more comfortable putting myself out there and trying new things. I go into my school presentations more comfortably and come out of them more successfully. I recently won second place in a poetry recitation contest at school because I knew how to comport myself in front of a crowd, all thanks to Slow Rep's ACT programs. The benefits one can reap from participating in theater from a young age are undeniable, and I recommend it for everyone. The ACT program has helped me find my passion, boost my self-esteem, and make me more empathetic, and it has put me in situations that allow me to learn more about myself. Not only has the ACT program helped me improve my life up to this point, but it has widened my future horizons as well. The program's classes on Shakespeare will help me out in English and history classes to come, and the audition prep courses help with job interviews of all kind. Slow Rep is like my home, and ACT is my family. The people there have sparked in me a passion that I plan to pursue for the rest of my life. Seeing our theater blossom and grow is everything I want, because I know how it has changed my life, and all I wish is for it to change the lives of others as well. Thank you.
Melody?
Good evening. My name is Melody Clement. I'm the parent of a beautiful, big-hearted, expressive 18-year-old. She is right there. Who, since she was very young, has seen the world through a highly empathic, creative lens. Slow Rep made its entrance into Maggie's life as an early teen. And I can tell you, as a former elementary school teacher, arts administrator, LGBTQ+ advocate, and fellow performing artist out in this community, but mostly as a parent, Maggie's time in Slow Rep's Academy of Creative Theater, ACT, supported her in ways I can't even begin to describe to you in 3 minutes, but I'll try. During her most formative years as an openly queer teenager, navigating where she fit, Maggie found a welcoming home at Slow Rep at a time when high school fell disappointingly short. ACT gave her a uniquely supportive and highly skilled community of mentors and friends that not only cultivated her love and curiosity of theater, but also helped her grow in how she viewed herself. At Slow Rep, Maggie learned that the power of theater wasn't just about honing her own talents as a performer, but even more so, it was about the power of her contribution to creating a safe, encouraging space that in turn helped others learn and grow. Maggie's reward was a multitude of friendships and deep connections. Our kids need programs like Slow Rep. They need to be able to connect with each other in an energizing, supportive environment where they can learn, be themselves, stretch themselves, and feel they're a part of something important. This is a crucial point. The act of growing up, of becoming a fully formed, curious, and compassionate human being is no small accomplishment, especially in this world of polarized everything and all-consuming social media. Every day, our kids' social, mental, and emotional health and well-being are on the line. And organizations like Slow Rep are critical support systems, especially as our public schools have struggled to support arts programs. I can't emphasize this enough. As Maggie now studies musical theater and social justice at the University of San Francisco, she is so excited to carry forward that spirit of what she and so many other kids have experienced at Slow Rep, that through theater, we can work toward creating a more inclusive and compassionate world for all. Please, let Slow Rep help 1,000 more Maggies in the years to come. Thank you.
That was our last speaker. Mr. Vichy put his hand down, so I think we're done.
Erica, we're not hearing you. Sorry, that's why I kept chiming in.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, no.
It's coming back over. One of you is going to have to accept the prompt. Did you see the prompt come up on the screen? My helper helped a little too much.
Can you hear us now?
I'm guessing that's a no since everyone's just staring at us.
We can.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
They're on board.
Just got Derek.
Thank you all.
Explains a lot about why Andy kept talking.
That's why she told us. Okay, well.
Good job, Andy.
Well, thank you to all of our public comment speakers. Sorry that you didn't hear us talking to you, but thank you very much. We very, very much appreciated all of your amazing words and support. We will go ahead and move forward now to council deliberation. So fellow council members, if you could raise your hand if you have a comment that you'd like to share. Councilmember Shorsman.
Sure, I'll start it off. I just can't, I think I'd be remiss without starting off by saying what an incredible opportunity this is after a really rough 2 years, right? Everybody has really dug in and been super fiscally smart and cautious, and it's put us in a really good position right now. And so I am largely supportive of almost everything in the staff's recommendation. I appreciate all the staff's work. They've put in a lot of work and very thoughtful suggestions, and everything in there I feel like is something that we really need and can use. I'm extremely supportive of the Slow Rep Challenge Grant. We received a lot of positive public comment about this project, and hearing the young people in particular, and Melody just now talking about how her child has thrived. Just I don't know how this is. It's just a win-win for everybody, I think, and it's going to vitalize our downtown and just create a great piece of property that the city will own for forever, and Slow Rep will be a great resident for us. I'm also happy to support all of the other items, especially the large number of pedestrian and bike improvements that are either going to be built or designed through the funding provided in this mid-year recommendation. I think I totaled it up just roughly to about $1.6 million in the 3 to 5 different projects that are outlined there. And I think they're all things that we have needed for a long time and go a long way towards our climate change goals and our infrastructure. And I'm also supportive. I know we may have some larger discussion about this. I'm supportive of the purchase of the equipment for teleconferencing and hybrid meetings. I know there are maybe a lot of variances of opinion about whether or not we should have hybrid meetings in the future. And I know we won't be able to get there immediately because of the time it will take to implement. But I do think that ultimately, as a public body, we need to provide opportunities for people who wouldn't normally participate to be able to participate. And so I'm supportive of that in some form going forward, even if we don't do anything more than approve the equipment tonight. The one thing that I would like to clarify more, if staff seems like they think it's necessary, and if my colleagues are supportive, is there is about $475,000 that has been allocated from the money that was originally going to be spent on the Cerro San Luis Greenway project before a large sum of grant funding was awarded in order to build that project. And there remains about $1.2 million of money that had been previously set aside and is not currently allocated in this mid-year budget recommendation. And I'd like to ask if we can continue to keep that money set aside. I believe that council already agreed to that a while back. And so I'd like us to remain firm in that commitment going forward as well. Otherwise, like I said, I'm really supportive of everything in here, and I look forward to hearing what other colleagues have to say.
Thank you so much. And before we go forward with Vice Mayor, Brigitte and Natalie, would you like to share about the 2019-20 chart figures?
We're happy to do that. And thank you to Natalie for quickly putting a slide together. And we'll show that and then bring back on the screen the recommendations before you. But what we were able to do here is quickly take the same chart that you have within the current report from back in 2019 that compared the third quarter of 19 to the third quarter of 2020. And then below now you see the chart that takes up the third quarter 20 and compares it to 21. So you can see essentially the differences and how ultimately the pandemic hit different sectors completely differently. It's not a 100% apples to apples comparison because HDL in the meantime shifted some of their industry categories around. But what is striking in the upper chart, if I could say it here, is how strongly the state and county pools came on during the pandemic. You can see that in the kind of orange chart. And if you compare that to the lower section, you'll see that that has come back into balance as we're reopening and people flock back to actual shops to do their shopping and turn back more to their usual shopping experience. But you see that general consumer goods reached almost $1.2 million in 2019, followed by 2020. And you see in 21 now, we're closer to $1.4 million actually in that category. So that category has come back very strongly. And I think that's also evident that it remained strong as people turned away from services. There was less traveling, there were less services connected to these type of activities, but people sure turned to buying goods, doing their remodels, et cetera, and that's reflective in this trend here as well. The other category that is coming back very strongly is actually autos and transportation. It's a little bit deceiving because there's so much price pressure right now in that category due to some of the supply chain issues. And currently you see that certain cars have price stickers and that's it. It's basically not for negotiation. The price is right now what the price is, but it is reflected within the charts that this started happening back in 2003. So just different categories, different experiences, and how they're coming back. You see most certainly restaurants and hotels also coming back. And now we'll probably see fuel and service stations come back as well, also largely because of price pressure and inflation that drives prices up. We've seen this throughout the energy market and most certainly also tremendously in the chemical supplies that the city uses, where prices have increased exponentially. But these trends are then reflected within the city sales tax and the tax we collect. This is just the Bradley-Burns sales tax. It is not pertaining to the local sales tax, which we refer to as a transaction tax. But similar situation there, a little bit different, not one-to-one, because it's collected a little bit different in regards of where the buyer is and where the product comes from. So the two sales tax categories are tiny bit different, so it's not always a one-to-one comparison. So, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you were able to kind of decipher the information here.
Thank you so much, Brigitte. That's amazingly fast, Natalie. Appreciate that look back. And I think it was really interesting to see how much people have been bounding back even in the midst of a really challenging time. So thank you very much. Vice Mayor Christensen.
Yes, thank you. Derek, could you just talk a second about the reference that Councilmember Shoresman made to the bike money and the grant and what's going on with that?
Yeah, Madam Mayor and Councilmember Christensen, happy to do that. So if you put your attention to page 118 of the staff report, on the top table 11, it shows a residual balance of 1.2 million. And then on the next page, you'll see in the packet, which is our forecast. So I think the way that I would approach this, you know, if council's interested in continuing to essentially not designate or pledge, but essentially keep this funds set aside like we did for tonight. If you recall, our pledge at the adoption of the supplemental budget was to come back with an appropriation of a portion or the full amount, and we're recommending the 476. We're proposing that this essentially, you know, go into the forecast, and then we'll track this if the council approves of the appropriations tonight. And then as part of the next budget, we would remind the next council as part of the financial plan for 23 to 25 that the council has essentially sequestered or pledged these dollars for an active transportation project.
Okay. All right, that's what I thought that she was referring to, but I wanted to just make sure and have the public understand also. Okay, so I also thank obviously staff and all the folks, the teams involved in the budget, and the presentation was really good. But Brigitte, you know, you've gotten better and better over the years, and just as I'm about ready to sail off into the distance, you're just about to perfection. So good job. And I think it's really funny. I was just laughing with Derek a little while ago when we were first talking about the pandemic in probably like late February of 2020. You know, we kind of had this idea like in 6 weeks it'll be over. We were wrong about that. And then we also had the idea that it was obvious that it wasn't going to be over in 6 weeks, that we would really have economic devastation. And here we are tonight, and we haven't had economic devastation through obviously a great deal of government involvement in terms of funding and debt forgiveness and that kind of thing, but also in terms of good stewardship. And I will, as Derek did earlier in his presentation, city manager report, I'll give credit to the staff for that, to the community for that, and to the council for that, because it really was an effort of really seeing what was in front of us and leaping forward and into it and getting through it. So it's really a pleasure to have a budget, a mid-year budget like this. And I fully support the recommendations, including the slow rep grant allocation. I think that this is exactly what I had in mind, at least when we specifically included the arts as one of the targets for our economic recovery, something that was really meaningful. It was a long-term investment that would really make a difference going through the years. And so this is really wonderful, I think. And I'm really impressed with the way that Slow Rep has taken a hard look at their initial plan and their initial projections for fundraising, and have come back with a really solid, probably more practical plan. And I think it's a great, the great partnership. So I look forward to those details coming back to us. I'm supportive of being hybrid ready, as some of you know, maybe Councilmember Shoresman was alluding to it. I'm not in favor of hybrid meetings at this stage. We are going to have fuller discussion. And one of the reasons is I really believe that council meetings are working meetings. They are not necessarily town halls or open forums. They're working meetings where you're trying to get to a resolution, and you often have members of the public who have come for a specific item. And when you have hours of public comment for items that are not on the agenda, which is often what happens with hybrid meetings from my observation, you do a disservice to the community and the members of the community who are there or present or trying to get through your actual agenda items, not to mention staff, and I'll just say the council also. I won't be on the council going forward long range, but to me, it's something to be approached very cautiously. But I do think it's important to be hybrid ready, just in case we have another completely unforeseen and totally unpredictable thing happen where we need to be in hybrid meetings, whatever that might be. But we'll have more discussions about this, and maybe by the time that the equipment comes, I won't be on the council anymore. I don't have to deal with it. She keeps her fingers crossed. Last but not least, I was considering your comments about ARPA over the break, Andy, and I understand what you're saying. I don't have a full understanding of all of the things that ARPA does or does not allow, or requires or doesn't require. My understanding, just quickly, is that it really wants you to take those federal funds and spend them on social services type things. So things like housing, homelessness seem to me perfectly in line with not only the ARPA money, but also, again, our major city goals and our real emphasis on some focusing on chronic homelessness support. So I'm not in any way opposed to that idea. I just don't want to say, yes, that's it, without knowing other options and other possibilities. But I'll just throw that in there. It's about all I'm ready to say at this point. And that's it for right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Council Member Pease.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you for this budget. I think that there are just so many things to be excited about. I'll start with the pay down of the pension liability, because I do feel like, although there are so many aspirational things I'll touch on next, I mean, really, it's the that kind of investment. It's just the standout accomplishment of our budget, and being able to as we get that settled, that puts us in the position to carry forward and to meet the current community needs and retain our excellent staff and move forward with our major city goals. So and then there's a gazillion other things in here that I'm really excited about. And certainly the slow rep grant, I'm also supportive of. It wasn't necessarily obvious to me. Again, it's a big investment, and does this make sense? And there's precedent, et cetera. It does make sense. There is precedent. There's an important investment, et cetera, supporting our youth and all those things. And everyone spoke so eloquently about it. And I'll just add that, the arts are truly a part of who we are as a community, whether it's visual arts or movement or music or written word or live theater. I think it truly is. It's part of our history, and it's part of how we will move forward into the future to be the best humans that we can be in community. So thank you to all that effort, to all the fundraising, to just a ton of volunteer work behind the scenes. There's also, staff has been super thoughtful in being able to support all of our major city goals, and some really strategic additions, a community services coordinator, volunteer coordinator, being able to support our homeless services in additional ways, and a lot of maintenance folks. There's a position for park maintenance beautification, which I'm envisioning would be like a gazillion demonstration gardens if throughout or demonstration landscaping to be able to support drought resistant, California native adapted butterfly gardens, beneficial insects, right? And just have this be put a whole bunch of things together. So I think that there's some really great potential there. One concern that we don't have to address tonight, but I look forward to hearing more about the parking and how to make sure that that is financially stable. Hopefully not relying on too much on the enforcement to be able to recover costs, much rather be able to set the parking to what's sustainable for our community and our businesses, and have such great clear communication and options that's mostly adequate. And we're just, nobody's happy about a parking ticket. So if we can hopefully set ourselves up and our community up for success, that would be awesome. Thank you, Councilmember Christensen. I appreciate your openness to the housing conversation. Like I say, it is important to me that if we are doing all these other things, that hopefully we can make that happen, but I understand that's not a commitment at this time. And I really appreciated Mr. Codron's potential hybrid solution on that grants and aid. That could we ask the HRC committee to review with that eye. Here's the 150,000. Here's what it would look like if we had another 100,000. So it's not a commitment, but at least it would then come back to us with an opportunity to say, yes, that's something that I think we should, that there is that kind of need and merit for those. So I do support the continued allocation commitment of that, the Greenway funds. I'm not ready to call that project the Cerro San Luis. That's a working title. And we'll, as far as the Greenway itself. But I think that we can certainly commit to using those funds for bike infrastructure. I think that's in alignment with what we had talked about before. I think those were the things I want to cover. Thanks again to all.
Thank you. Councilmember Marks.
Thank you. Well, as I begin my 14th year on San Luis Obispo City Council, sometimes mayor, sometimes council member, I recall many years where we had to make budget cuts. And that was really painful and difficult. And it was hard for the entire community. So this is the first time that I've experienced a situation where we actually have more funding than we thought we would have, and we get to make some very important policy decisions and realize some long-term and also major city goal visions that we have. I do want to say that paying down pension liabilities is crucial. I support that. I'm definitely think that we should give the city manager authority to settle any fines with that would arise from the WRF. Too much hand sanitizer, situation that we're dealing with. I also want to say that I'm really grateful to the prudent fiscal management that has gone on. And it's a tradition in San Luis Obispo. I'd say in terms of social policy, we're open and kind and if you want to say liberal, in terms of fiscal policy, our residents want us not to waste any money. And I call it thrift, not fiscal conservatism. That's a whole different thing. But they want us to be thrifty. They want us to pinch pennies, but also make good investments in terms of the dollars. So I do support the staff recommendation in this regard. I would like to see, if it's possible, for the HRC to consider what they would do with an extra $100,000 as a hybrid solution. I think that would be great. It's very painful when HRC has to turn down wonderful projects just because there's only so much money. And I do think 100,000 is a significant but also manageable amount to look at. I'm happy about the reimbursement for the 600 Tank Farm Road project. And I hope we can speed this up because it's so dangerous the way that it is right now. It's just scary. I mostly drive that, but I see people walking and bicycling so close to traffic. It just always is, the safety aspect of it is always appalling to me when I'm on that road. So I hope we can speed it up. And perhaps this reimbursement arrangement will allow us to do that. When it comes to slow rep, I have to confess I was a drama minor in college, and I'm a big fan of theater in general and also slow rep. What I would like to suggest, though, is when it does come back to City Council in the spring, that we consider holding the funds in trust in a city account, having benchmarks that the disbursement of the funding would be attached to. Kind of like a construction loan where, you accomplish a certain amount and then you get some funding. I just want to make sure that the way that this is structured is fiscally responsible in terms of our budget and our responsibility in terms of use of taxpayer money. Also, that it is useful in terms of the progress of the project will help them as they structure what they're doing next. I do want to say it's a really minor thing, but I listened to Fred, the public commenter, about the problem of these shared bike and pedestrian paths. And so I'm hoping that when we look at the allocation for landscape improvements on the Madonna Road bike paths, we could also maybe put up some signs that would say, bicyclists yield to pedestrians. I really think the pedestrians, just like a little rowboat has got, the right of way over a giant ocean liner, I think the pedestrians need to have that security and at least a sign so that enthusiastic high-speed bicyclists realize that the pedestrians need to be given the courtesy. Many of these pedestrians, like Fred, are senior citizens who might not be able to nimbly jump out of the way if a bicycle is coming too close. Anyway, just want to mention that. And I also wanted to say to my fellow colleagues on City Council, I really appreciate all the questions, and the staff, I appreciate all the hard work and the answer to the questions. So thank you. With that, I'll sign off. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Councilmember Marks. I appreciate each of you, as my colleagues, sharing all of your thoughts and your opinions. I know that sometimes the community may not know how much detail that we are reading and discussing behind the scenes. Obviously not with each other and not breaking any sort of Brown Act, but talking to the staff and talking to community members and really trying to get as much information as possible to make these decisions. So I really appreciate this time. And I know that, this is such a lucky time that we get to actually look at how to give out money versus saying how we're going to cut money. And I very much understand that, Councilmember Marks. It's really truly a blessing to be able to have this moment. And I say that this is one, obviously, because we are being given money from the federal and state governments, but it's also because of our amazing staff and the efficiencies and savings and reserves and hard work that they have done. Obviously, this council put aside money in the midst of COVID and said, what are we going to have to do? We don't know. And as everything has come along, the staff has continued to look at the current and the future needs. So really appreciate that. I would have to say with, sorry, I'm going back to my notes now versus my extemporaneous rambling. So I did have some questions around the tax revenue on the cannabis, but I appreciate city manager explaining that really is not what we're dealing with right now. So I really appreciated that. I am also very appreciative of the conservative approach, thrifty, penny pinching, whatever you want to call it. But to me, I've said this many times, and I truly mean it, is this is the city I studied when I was in my master's program for public administration. And when I studied the city's budget, from then in 2004 to 2000 and now, we are consistently being very smart with our money and how we invest and how we move forward. So that's something that is exciting to me to continue. And that also shows when we look at, oh gosh, I'm not sure the page right now, but it's okay. Looking at the budget and the interest when we're talking about the ESG's investments on last Thursday from the Investment Oversight Committee, really seeing how we won't get to see much money coming out of our interest in the anytime soon, but being able to plan the way that Brigitte, you and your staff are planning allows for that to not be a question of, how much should we worry about going forward? We're always going to be ahead of the game. So that's really good. And I have to say on packet page 4, we're looking at the workload analysis and preparation in the community development department. And it just reminds me consistently of the work that we do at the city is at public sector, is that the staff, we're the widgets. We are that we don't, there's nothing extra that we're selling. It's that the work that is being seen by the community are actually the people that are providing the services. So when I see how we're constantly looking at the workload and seeing how we can balance out full-time employees and contract work and really doing the best for employees, but also doing the best for the community as a whole. Slow rep, I really appreciated all of the letters. I appreciated the time that I got to spend with Kevin Harris and Chip Vichy to understand what they're requesting, and really the time that Slow Rep has taken and the board members and volunteers to really look at how do they scale back what they were going to be building as well. And so really finding the right proportion for what works for the community and what works for the city and what works for Slow Rep to put together great programs. And at the same time, this will also be an economic driver. And one of the things that we, you don't like to talk about money and art at the same time, but really the great work that grows people through art is also something that will grow the economy in the future. So I see this as a very long-term, great investment, similar to the Performing Arts Center and the amazing investment that's been in our community for 20 plus years now when I graduated from college. And I really appreciate Councilmember Pease bringing up the affordable housing ideas. I like the what if scenario concept if HRC is amenable when looking at the subcommittee, looking at the grants, because I do think that when the Slow Rep Challenge grant came, the first thought in my head is how do we work with providing more money to affordable housing? Because it's where these are all our top goals, is how do we get help for housing and homelessness? And then I look at our budget, and we have committed now to our homelessness response manager to being a full-time employee. It's not a contract, it's not a pilot program anymore. And I see the mobile crisis unit and other work that we're doing being committed in our budget with this money. So really excited to see that. And I'm also really excited to see the volunteer coordinator, because I think that so many people come to want to help, and I love that. But at the same time, we need people to actually organize and make it efficient, but and useful for people to be involved. So really excited about that as well. And I am very much in the in the desire to see hybrid in the long term. I understand that we may not have the equipment, supply chain demand, et cetera. Vice Mayor Christensen still being here at that time. I don't know what that's going to look like, but I think when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we are talking about being inclusion to all. And hybrid is another opportunity for someone who is not able to leave their home, someone who is has younger children or parents or family members they're taking care of. Yes, other topics do come sometimes when they are not expected, but I think that if we're talking about inclusion, how can we not provide another opportunity in this day of technology to have more access to the public and have the public have more access to us? So I think that's really important as we go forward. What that looks like money-wise, support-wise, equipment-wise, I understand that may not all come tomorrow, but I think it's very important. So that's my thoughts. And of course, yes, hand sanitizer as far as allowing the city manager to move forward and approve the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit violation settlement. I think that would be a good plan. City manager.
And members of the council, as we wrap up tonight, I just want to provide a couple items for clarification. One, in terms of hybrid readiness, this, just to be clear, if we make these investments, what it will also enable us to do is essentially automate a lot of the historic work that was done by a person operator. And so the technologies evolve so much. I think we've shared through the pandemic that we have been unable to procure an operator. And so this technology will essentially allow it to be automated for the most part. So irrespective of the decision to make to go to hybrid, it will be a wise investment in terms of technology for both the council hearing room and the council chamber itself. I just did want to remind the council that the city's investment in performing arts is, this isn't the first time. I think many of you know we were also a founder, and this year when we celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Performing Arts Center. By my loose estimation, the city has invested over the last 25 years close to $10 million in supporting the PAC. And so now we're doing that in our community, in our land, and we're leveraging a fantastic partner who's going to raise the dollars to build a building here and build out our cultural district. So I just wanted to remind the community about that. Certainly we hear the council about the parking fees, and we'll be looking at ways to make sure we're smart. And I think we're trying to move people into parking structures and utilize those structures to the maximum extent feasible. And so, Madam Mayor, if the council's willing to move forward tonight's recommendations, I do have some ideas about the ARPA piece that I think would be helpful to set us up for success for the supplemental budget. But I'll defer that conversation perhaps after the council entertains the staff recommendation tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Pease.
Sorry, did Vice Mayor Christensen make the motion? Okay, got cut off there. I'll second.
Thank you. City Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Vice Mayor Christensen,
Yes.
Councilmember Pease,
Yes.
Councilmember Marks,
Yes.
Councilmember Shoresman,
Yes.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. And the vote passes 5-0. Whew, thank you for all of that hard work. And City Manager, can you share more about your ARPA suggestions?
Yeah, so I've heard tonight a couple themes, and I think that, based upon the major city goals, my recommendation would be on the $4.6 million. And I know that there's the 4 buckets that ultimately the council can look at. And this would be subject to appropriation as part of the supplemental budget process. To essentially, I would recommend take $2 million of the 4.6, and then staff would come back with a supplemental budget and develop a NOFA. It's clear that there's going to be a need in the future for some affordable housing projects. And I would add also perhaps $100,000 subject to the appropriation for additional augmentation of funding for our grants and aid, which then leaves you roughly about $2.5 million in remaining ARPA that would be subject to the supplemental budget allocation. If you recall, 1.1 of that is already essentially general fund or general revenues. So you would have complete authority about how to designate those dollars for a public purpose. And then the remaining $1.5 million would have to be used within the restrictions of the federal rules for those dollars. So, and the reason I make this recommendation tonight is because I think we have a few affordable housing projects that are going to be coming down. We have a few projects downtown. We heard of one tonight from a speaker. We have one on Upper Monterey. And these two are going to be once in a lifetime opportunities for us. And, the good news about our affordable housing program has been we've been very successful in the last couple of years, but we all know it's not enough affordable housing. The piece about being successful is that we've largely exhausted our affordable housing fund. And so the funds that we have collected in lieu of fees, we've spent, and rightfully so, on projects. We don't want to hold on to those dollars. But looking in the future and seeing the need out there, there are a couple projects. So the recommendation again would be set aside $2 million subject to a NOFA as part of the supplemental budget, $100,000 to augment the grants and aid, and leave the balance of $2.5 million subject to the council's discretion and allocation as part of the supplemental budget process.
Councilmember Shoresman.
So are you asking that you're making that recommendation for us to agree to tonight?
Well, if there's consensus, we would come back as part of the supplemental budget. What typically is that we have typically a whole process that leads up to essentially by the time we bring a budget back, it's called strategic budget direction. The supplemental budget process doesn't afford that. And so really what's on the table for the supplemental budget is the $4.6 million in ARPA fund. We want to get a running start at that. So we don't come at it cold come June and the council's disappointed of, well, why isn't this going faster, so to speak? And so if we have an indication that conceptually there's this pot of $2 million for affordable housing, $100,000 for grants and aid, and then the balance will be subject to council discretion within the federal rules. We've got some real clarity about the direction, the way that the council's going. Plus, we can send some signals to affordable housing providers out there that, hey, as you have projects coming through the entitlement phase, there's clearly some funding that the council has in mind to set aside for the community, the housing.
Councilmember Pease.
Thank you. And I'm just a little confused still, because are you saying the 2 million for the NOFA and then the other 2-ish million would be available for council discretion, meaning could go to a specific housing project? So that all four, or you're saying that would be at the NOFA? Sorry. I can't hear you.
Yeah,
Okay.
we lost volume, I think.
Out of the 4.6 million, 2 million for affordable housing project, which is consistent with the rules. $100,000 for assistance for grants, and then leave the balance subject to use with the federal rules. And so we come back in supplemental budget process and get direction. And the council may say, hey, we want it all to go to affordable housing, or we want some to go to homelessness, or we want to, broadband, or, some of the uses that Brigitte outlined tonight. We're not asking you to make a firm commitment, but what we don't want to, what I'm concerned about is that the council has in mind that and I've heard some of you say that you want some funding set aside for affordable housing with the ARPA funds, is to make that decision in June, and then we're not ready to then get the funds out the door until winter of 2023, and we've got a new council on board, et cetera, and we've got to bring everyone along. So.
Are you good,
I mean,
Councilmember Pease?
I think that's a fine placeholder. I kind of want it all to go to housing, but as we've talked about, this is not the time that we're doing that. So I think that's a fine approach, and we can hear what other options there are when it comes to that time. So I'm fine with that as a starting spot.
Thank you. Councilmember Marks?
Yes, I think that it's a very decent proposal, and it allows council to have the discretion that we need at the time that it comes back. And I appreciate the city manager making this proposal. I was going to try to do the same thing, but I definitely think the city manager did a better job than I could. I do want to say that the Affordable Housing Fund is something that is really crucial, and the fact that it's been exhausted is a plus, because it shows that we are actually investing that money in the affordable housing program, and we just need more of it. So I'm in favor of the prospect of staff making that proposal. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Shoresman.
Yeah, I appreciate City Manager Johnson's initiative in throwing something out to see if it would stick, and I do feel that the affordable housing is a good source, and obviously it's one of the allowable sources for this funding. But I feel like I wasn't ready to discuss this in this level of detail tonight, and I don't feel like I have enough information about what all the other specifications and rules are around the funds, just from what I've heard tonight, to restrict ourselves on the rest of the money if we commit to the 2 million right now. So I'm just a little hesitant because of the sort of last minute nature of this proposal, I think.
In just out of curiosity in this concept, city manager, is this to get it on our next agenda? Is that what I'm hearing? Or would that wait until much later?
Well, this would come back to the council in supplemental budget in June.
Okay,
This will
in
come
June.
Back to you in June.
Okay.
So we can get a running start. And please don't be, stuck with the figures. If you
The volume went away.
Sorry.
If you just say, if you just say that there's housing, that here's your priority in grants and aid, I'd like to get a commitment to grants and aid. If we're going to go out and ask the HRC to augment their funding to 250. I need something more than just a conceptual, because we're going to essentially ask them to augment their funding cycle now. But if you want to just leave the other amounts, vague and just say that the balance, shall be used and prioritized for affordable housing and homelessness, we're happy to do that. I'm just trying to create some policy signals to those out there that are working on projects about the size of the breadbasket that the council's entertaining, because we have some projects coming forward. They're going to be asking for funding, and I won't be able to give them answers, or Michael won't be able to give them answers. And so I'm trying to at least advance some sort of level of certainty to the extent possible.
Thank you. Councilmember Pease.
Thanks. And I just wanted to also clarify that when the concept that I have is in the NOFA is the idea that this could be kind of non-traditional housing. So creative approaches, innovative approaches to be able to house people in kind of that lower income affordability, but not necessarily like our traditional affordable housing projects, and maybe some different partners as well. I mean, great, our current partners, but I think it could throw a bigger net. I think of conversion of existing spaces, or co-housing, cooperative housing kinds of ventures, SROs, just that there's maybe some more a broader net of opportunities. So wanted to make sure that was clear as your staff is having conversations. Thanks. And sorry. And yes, the 100,000, I think I already said, I want that. I thought we had consensus to at least consider it.
Vice Mayor Christensen.
Yes. Well, to me, if you wanted some kind of input tonight, you should have told us so we could have thought about it. Because I don't even know what an OFA is. I can't remember. I'm not really. I mean, yeah, housing and homelessness, but like you just heard from Councilmember Pease, it could be anything. And I don't necessarily want to. I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I'm kind of where we're coming. It's late. My brain's already gone. So it's like, yeah, housing and homelessness, but what does that say? That to me is not really any more useful than the rules themselves from ARPA, which I don't even know what they are. So it's February 15th. Why are we having to give you something now for something that's not coming back to us till June when we have no information? And I think we have probably very different ideas about what we mean by housing support and housing funds. And I don't know what a NOFA is anymore. For instance, what Andy just said about new people and new partners, yes, but you know what? The people who are doing it are the ones who know about it and the ones who can put together the 13 sources of funding. So anyway, it's, it's like, yeah, I think committing to that city goal, major city goal is good, but whether that gives you enough actual information to tell a builder or someone who's doing it that, yeah, the council's there. I think that's not really, I think that's putting the cart before. I'm just very uncomfortable with this discussion. And that just shows you how great a job you usually do with giving us support information. It's like, what?
I'm responding to the contemporaneous comments were made tonight.
Well, that's what, see, it's
All
all,
of this is, you know,
it's all
somewhat a
Amy's fault.
surprise, so I feel like a little bit is being left to the altar. Because.
You know.
So.
Well, you know, but even in our discussions, in our updates, it's been like, this is something that we're gonna deal with later. So, yeah, as I said, when it's gonna be later, I don't think about it. I don't have any.
So what we can do is just return back with a full blue sky discussion in June, and just understanding that the 4.7 million likely won't be available till sometime in winter of 2023. If that's where the council wants to go. We're just trying to put on conceptually on the table, is there interest in, and maybe it's not dollar amounts, but you want to say that there's priorities for housing and homelessness. And so what a NOFA is a notice of funding availability. So what we do is we sit down with funders and, program providers, and we identify what are the gaps and needs. And then we develop a request for funding. So the request for funding comes in, and we're able to score and objectively evaluate the proposals and then bring back a recommendation to the city council. But if that's all too premature, we can just table this discussion, and we'll come back in June with a recommendation on ARPA consistent with the major city goals, and then we'll start anew, and then we'll pick up from there about how we want to move forward with any sort of actual funding allocations.
Well, here's for instance, my two first questions. Why don't we just give the money to a housing developer, like People Self-Help or like Haslo? Why don't we just do that? That's my first thing. And why would we become experts in housing and be scoring? Look what happened when we started a cannabis program. We don't know what we're doing when we're doing housing like this. I don't want to become a housing funder. I don't think it's appropriate for the city, and I don't think we know what we're doing. And because I spend a lot of time talking to these people, so I don't get why we're doing this. I don't understand why we would do it that way unless we have to because of the way the ARPA funding works. So I don't know if it's just me being especially out of it tonight or what I'm missing here, but.
So ultimately, we're responsible for the funding. So if we're going to allocate the funding, I would expect that we would allocate to its highest and best use, and ultimately that we would allocate the funding consistent with the guidance from the federal government. You're right, we don't build affordable housing, but we certainly, if we're going to fund it, we can talk to developers and figure out where's the unmet need, how to develop a funding program, and typically
the unmet need is everywhere. I mean, anything we do is.
And so I think it could be as simple as Councilmember P's articulated. Is it for SROs? Is it for housing that is allocated for wraparound services? Is it for funding assistance for missing middle? Those are the conversations you have. We don't necessarily become experts in housing per se, but as the receiving entity of the funding from the federal government, we have an obligation to make sure the funding is spent in a responsible way, because ultimately we're going to be accountable to report that.
Sure. So that to me sounds like a very detailed discussion that we actually haven't had. So what we're going to have, if we said to you, okay, yes, we're going to do housing, homelessness housing, low-income housing, that's a long ways away from having something ready to go, isn't it? I mean, I
think it sounds like that perhaps we'll just come back with the major city goals in June, and we'll have an open discussion. We'll provide the full details of what the permissible uses are, and then the council can give us direction. I heard consensus tonight. Sorry, I misread it.
You did hear consensus, but I don't really understand that consensus is saying housing and homelessness gets to, I'm sorry to take up so much time.
We have a couple other people that have to, so let them put their hand
I
up.
don't see how that gets to 2 million of the NOFA and 1.5 million of this. I don't get that. I don't understand why. I don't understand that. I don't understand why we don't.
It's late tonight, so.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of people that have their hands up, so let's go ahead and do that, and I'll have my comments as well. Councilman remarks.
Briefly, I think what the city manager is asking for is council direction. And I think we should give that council direction to come back with proposals. If council and the public need more time to really study this whole housing question, as has been articulated by Councilmember Pease and Vice Mayor Christensen, why not have a study session in May? Why wait till June? We can do that earlier so that we're really fully prepared and the community has a chance to weigh in. But I think it's actually, this item is not on the agenda. What is on the agenda is the budget, okay? So in terms of the budget process, we're talking about giving staff direction to come back with proposals at the time of the supplemental budget hearing in June. And if we need a study session earlier, the staff can also figure that one out. So I think it's actually a pretty simple, straightforward thing. Do we want to give staff direction to do what the city managers proposed? I say yes. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Councilmember Shoresman.
I was going to ask a similar question if it was possible to maybe come back and discuss this a little before June so that we could go into that process. And then I was also curious if we still were needing to provide direction on the grants and aid, $100,000. And if so, would that be a one-time, just this for this particular grants and aid period? Which I guess is a moot point if we don't need to talk about that even right now too.
City Manager, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, so I think we would want direction to bring forward $100,000 as part of the supplemental budget for grants and aid, so that we can tell the HRC immediately as part of their grant deliberations that they have 250,000, not 150,000. So we need to get that direction tonight. It's an idea that was brought on the table tonight. So I heard consensus. And so if there's the consensus, if that can materialize that, yes, that's the direction we want to go. And then we're happy to schedule a special meeting in May with the council to have a study session about the use of ARPA funding and anticipation for clarity as part of the supplemental budget. Just understanding that May doesn't give us a ton of time because your hearing for budget deliberations for the supplemental budget is the beginning of June. And so if we had something, say the middle of May, there's a short turnaround time to then actualize and put that into action for the council in the beginning of June, and hence why I raised the issue tonight.
I would be supportive of a study session whenever it would be best for staff to do it in advance of that June process. And then last clarifying question again was the grants and aid, this $100,000, would it be just a one-time $100,000 augmentation, I'm assuming, not an ongoing increase?
That's correct. If we're going to use ARPA funding, there is absent the council wanting to, dip into reserves. It's at least based on today, the forecast doesn't sustain an additional augmentation of funding in grants and aid. That to be subject to future discussions as part of a financial plan process, but tonight it doesn't show that with the current other levels of programs being funded.
Perfect. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding that correctly, and I would be supportive of providing that that recommendation or that guidance to staff right now.
City Manager, can you remind me when the HRC brings the grants recommendations to us? I can't see it on here.
Bring Michael Codring back over.
And while you're doing that,
they make their recommendations in April. I wrote down in my notes.
Cool. Thank you so much, Councilor Pease. And then just also a reminder for all of us on the council that we don't have an April 5th meeting. So we approved that, I believe, last meeting. So we do kind of lose a little bit of time as we're trying to
move this forward. I will say that for me personally, I am in favor of the what if concept for the HRC for the 100,000 one time, just as my personal thoughts. Michael?
So the HRC, I don't have the forecast in front of me, but those recommendations, I believe, do come in April. So second meeting of April. But it may be May as well. So, but it's right in that time frame.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm looking at the April 19th meeting, trying to find it. See it.
So just Madam Mayor, members of the council, so.
It hasn't been placed on the calendar yet.
That explains it, thanks.
Okay.
I just thought I need glasses or something. Okay.
The process.
Thank you, Teresa.
There you go.
I don't have a light over on my side. So.
Oh, you don't?
No. So the process has us coming to the council in July of 2022 with the final GIA recommendations. So the HRC is going to hold a public hearing in May. And so then in August of 2022, that's when we would have the contracts out and we release the funding. So,
okay.
So the signal tonight, I'm hearing consensus that that's what we want us to do.
Yeah.
And then we'll hold the rest of the funding off in advance, subject to a study session. We'll have to find the times to do that.
I've actually heard at least three of them giving you the go ahead on the housing stuff.
Yeah.
You don't need me.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
I know she's the loudest, but.
And I'm usually the most active and proactive and consistent, but in this case, I'm going to be the conservative one. So
Yeah, I wasn't comfortable with it either. I think I was with Carlin, but I guess that's.
But you got Jan, Andy
Yep.
in there?
Yeah.
So there you go. The new riders of the Purple Sage. The Lone Range.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, you can tell it's getting late. All right.
I just would like to say, I think we need to continue on with the agenda and finish this meeting because it is getting really late. We're getting a little punchy here. So
Yes, I agree. And where I was headed next. So I think at this point we've had the recommendations approved. We've given a little additional information to the city manager and of course also by default to community development department and HRC, the Human Relations Commission. So the people who are coming on board in a couple of months, once we finish our interviews, we'll have a new little extra job. So moving forward to item 6B, the public hearing item before us to introduce an ordinance to renew a franchise agreement with Phillips 66 Pipeline LLC. I see Matt Horn, and I don't know if there are other staff coming on board to share with this, but
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council.
So
tonight, we'll have Paul Fields do the majority of our presentation tonight, but we're here to introduce an ordinance to renew a franchise agreement for Phillips 66. And Phillips 66 has existing pipelines in the ground in the public right of way. And so this is part two of a three-part process. And like I said before, Paul Fields was here. He's our administrative analyst in the Public Works Department. He'll be giving the presentation. And tonight we also have support from Phillips 66 in their public awareness section, their program manager section, operations and real estate. If council has any questions about, how Phillips 66 operates their lines or questions about the existing lines, we really have their support to help us out. And from here, I'll pass it over to Paul and he'll give the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. My name is Paul Fields. I'm the administrative analyst for the city's Public Works Department. The item before your consideration tonight is the award of a franchise agreement to Phillips 66 Pipeline LLC. Staff's recommendation is that the council introduce an ordinance to award a franchise agreement to Phillips 66 Pipeline LLC for the operation and maintenance of common carrier pipelines located in the city's rights-of-way. The proposed agreement pertains to common carrier pipelines. These are pipelines in which the franchisee transports other companies' products as well as its own. These can be distinguished from proprietary pipelines, which are pipelines in which the franchisee exclusively transports its own products. I'm now going to give a brief history of the franchise agreement. In July of 2001, a 10-year franchise agreement was awarded to Union Oil Company of California. In April of 2007, the franchise was transferred over to ConocoPhillips Pipeline Company. In June 2011, after the agreement lapsed, it was renewed for an additional 10-year term. In February of 2013, the franchise agreement was again transferred, this time over to Phillips 66 Pipeline Company. This franchise agreement expired in June of 2021, and in November of 2021, Phillips submitted an application requesting the award of a new franchise agreement. During the period, the city will receive payment for the lapse period, and all insurance requirements remained in place. The manner of granting a franchise agreement by municipalities to public utilities is governed by the California Public Utilities Code. The process is also incorporated into Article 10 of the city charter. In accordance with these processes, on January 11, 2022, the council adopted a resolution declaring its intention to consider the award of a new franchise agreement to Phillips 66. Should the council elect to award a franchise agreement at tonight's public hearing, the next and final step would be the second reading and adoption of the ordinance. The proposed agreement would grant a non-exclusive right to Phillips 66 to maintain and operate existing pipelines located in the city's rights-of-way. The application submitted by Phillips 66 is proposed for a 3-year term. This is because they will be ceasing operations at their Santa Maria refinery and divesting operations in the San Luis Obispo area. The agreement stipulates that the Public Works Department shall grant approval for all plans for decommissioning and removal of pipelines. It also requires council approval for any expansion of infrastructure. Franchise fees are set in accordance with the California Public Utilities Code. Rates are based on lineal foot of pipeline by internal diameter. Phillips 66 has approximately 18,000 feet of common carrier pipelines with an internal diameter of 8 inches and approximately 6,000 feet of common carrier pipelines with an internal diameter of 12 inches. In light of the term of the previous franchise agreement ending, staff's recommendation is that the council introduce an ordinance to award a franchise agreement to Phillips 66 Pipeline LLC for the operation and maintenance of common carrier pipelines. That concludes the presentation. As Matt mentioned earlier, staff from Phillips 66 is in attendance tonight to support with questions.
Thank you so much, Paul. Do any of my colleagues have any questions? You did such a great job. It's very straightforward. Okay, now is that time for public comment. If there are any members of the public that would like to talk to us at this time, raise your virtual hand, and you can, and we'll go ahead and call on you. City Clerk, I don't see anyone raising their virtual hand. Do you?
No, I do not.
All right, then we'll move forward to council deliberation. Any thoughts or motion? Councilmember Pease.
Yes, thank you. I've had agenda review and was able to ask my couple of questions. I think it is pretty straightforward, and I appreciate that there's the kind of the safeguards that this doesn't include expansion, and so I think it is pretty straightforward. I'll move approval.
Councilmember Marks.
I'd like to second approval, and I also want to say it's very, very important that Phillips 66 maintain these pipelines, and this is a way of holding them accountable. And also there are pipelines that people don't even, neither the city nor the gas company even know where they're located. They show up when construction projects go forward, and so this would, I think, place responsibility on the corporation, which is important. So I'm in favor of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you so much. City Clerk, will you call the roll?
I think Michelle's hand is up.
Yep, I just have one quick question. He literally
sorry.
did go through those slides so quickly. Could he go back to slide number 6 real quick for me, please? I think
Sorry
I
about
had
that.
my screen taken up by people's faces and didn't see. So this is a set formula, basically, if I understood that correctly. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. The California Public Utilities Code prescribes the rates that municipalities are allowed to charge.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Thank you. Sorry about that, Councilmember Shoresman. All right, City Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Councilmember Pease,
Yes.
Councilmember Marks,
Yes.
Councilmember Shoresman,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Christensen,
Yes.
Mayor Stewart.
Yes, and I will say I too am thankful that it's not for expansion and that we have a very specific rate formula that was concerning to me before, and thought we'd have a much larger discussion today until I had a few more questions answered. So thank you. Okay, so motion passes 5-0 and we move forward to liaison reports and communications. Are there any updates from meetings you've gone to, et cetera? Councilmember Pease.
Thanks. I'll just briefly, because it's timely, note that for the Groundwater Sustainability Commission that we're submitting our first annual report, even though we have only just submitted the plan, it's not even finalized yet, but we do have to do the report. And it's a super short window. Comments are due. It's available now, and the comments are due February 23rd, public comment. And then we have a follow-up meeting on March 9th. So you could comment there as well, but I want to make sure folks are aware of that. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other liaison reports? All right, I have the board Capslow board meeting this Thursday, so share updated information from there. And looking forward to seeing Congressman Carbajal come to our community to share the Congresswoman of the Year awards. And I look forward to seeing a few of those on Thursday as well. Thank you so much. For those of you who are familiar with the teach-in at Cal Poly, I encourage you to pop in if you just Google Cal Poly teach-in, I'm sure it's there. And there are a lot of different diversity, equity, inclusion seminars and sessions that will be taught by a variety of different people. And this is our chance as the community to get to pop in and kind of, audit a class in a sense. So take a minute and maybe put it in your ear as you're doing your other items. So thank you so much. Appreciate everyone's time. And I hope you all have a good night. See you back for our next regular city council meeting on March 1st, 2022 at 6 p.m. via teleconference for maybe the last time.
Good night.
Sign off. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.